Committee Room 30.
Can I declare the meeting open to the public and move on to agenda item 3? Are there any apologies? No apologies?
Try to get it.
Agenda item 4. Chairperson's business. Now, there was a proposed visit, members, to Dublin on Thursday. Now, I have run into difficulties this month, and but only ends up there's a couple of us going. So my view on this is, if we go a very small number, I think it looks very bad. I know you're let down, are you? No, but I'm serious about this. I mean,
no, Ger, I think you're right.
I would like, if we're going at some stage, it would be nice to go at least 6 out of the committee. I think if you go with 2 people, it looks very bad. That's okay.
Well, as I said to you, Chair, I'll go along with whatever the committee agrees. But I just want to make it quite clear that we're going now for the 3rd time.
But those things, it is being beyond our control.
I think it's down to the members of this committee. It's not beyond our control. It's down to the members of this committee. It's a little bit of, you've got to show a little bit of decorum when you're meeting people from another jurisdiction.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have come here,
yeah,
and we can't seem to want to go down there for some reason.
Well, I can assure you, as far as I'm concerned, as Chair, I have absolutely no problem going down to meet my counterparts. No problem.
No, I'm not having a problem with that, Chair. You know where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
And I think we should just keep that in mind ourselves. If it comes up again,
I think if in the future we can agree, we need to be certain that we get numbers to go, and I think it's vital. I mean, to go down with 1 or 2 people, it's very poor.
Disappointed, Chair, but I think I'll agree with you.
We'll record that.
When are we penciling in for again?
Well, we'll leave that to the clerk to see how things progress. Is that okay? I'm quite happy. I think but
really only 12 weeks now.
Yeah, I understand that, and it could be difficult, but we'll see what we can do. And I can assure you, it was my fault. I was too double booked.
Chair, I'm just thinking, I know all of this is with 12 weeks, but we need to take into consideration the Dáil elections as well.
That is right.
Yeah.
So,
that's what I'm saying. You've got to be very careful here.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay? Okay, Stella? Okay.
They're coming up well.
Agenda item 5, minutes of the meeting the 24th of November 2015. Can refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting held on 24th of November, pages 61 to 67. Are members contented that the draft minutes are accurate? Okay, members. So I will sign. And item 6, matters arising. Can refer members to matters arising at pages 71 to 87. Can I advise members that DARD has notified the committee of a stakeholder event taking place on Thursday, the 10th of December 2015 at 12:45 in the conference hall at Loughery campus. This event is part of a public consultation on the Department's proposals for successors to the Tackling Rural Poverty and Social Exclusion Framework 2011-2015 that DARD wrote to the committee about last week. If any members wish to attend, details are in your table pack. Also in the table papers is a note of the meeting in Queen's University which took place on the 17th of November. Are members content to action on the matters arising as suggested on the index sheet at pages 69 to 70? Okay, members? And item 7, an oral briefing from DARD and Rural Needs Bill. Can refer members to the following papers in your pack: Rural Needs Bill, explanatory and financial memorandum, and delegated power memorandum at pages 17 to 27. Answer of the oral briefings provided at last week's meeting in your table papers pack. A late written submission from NICVA in the Rural Needs Bill is also on your table pack. Advice from the Examiner of Statutory Rules on the scrutiny of delegated powers at page 89. Memo from the Clerk and summary table highlighting key issues at pages 4 to 16. And advise members that all the papers relating to the bill are in the electronic bill folder in SharePoint and are also available in the committee on the committee website. Can I ask members to note that DARD officials are here today to discuss the Department's position on the key issues raised during the evidence taking last week and to provide indicative indications of amendments it is considering. It is also the opportunity of the committee to start to think and make clear where it is likely to seek to want amendments. Can I welcome Louise Hunter-Ward, Head of Central Policy, Colette McMaster, Assistant Secretary, Director of Food, Farm and Rural Policy, and Ostrod Stewart, Head of Rural Proving Branch. Members, can I suggest that the officials address each key issue in turn and take questions on that key issue? This may take some time, but at least we can be sure that all the areas will be covered. Can I ask you maybe to kick off and begin, and we'll take it from there, okay?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And you've covered the approach, which I hope members will find helpful and appreciative of the pressures on committee's time as well. There are 11 issues, Chair and committee members, that we will go through. And I appreciate, Chair, just in terms of supporting you in terms of the timekeeping. The first two are possibly what the committee might deem the most substantive, so we'll do a little bit more of a preamble on those. I just wanted to give you a quick canter through what the 11 issues are, just to signpost members, and then I'll go into the first one, and then we'll pause and enable members then to take questions. So the 11 issues are the nature of the statutory duty in clause 1, inclusion of second one's inclusion of some public authorities other than departments and councils actually on the face of the bill. Third issue is a perception that the bill lacks teeth or sanctions. The fourth issue is the scope of statutory duty in clause 1. Fifth one is the power for DARD to issue guidance, advice and information. Sixth, the provision of training. 7, the transparency of the reporting arrangements. 8, the purpose of the proposed cooperation arrangements. 9, the terminology used in the bill. 10, measures to review and evaluate the effectiveness of the bill. And finally, 11, whether the bill should make a specific provision in relation to decisions on rural school closures, and I think that was raised by Mrs Dobson at a previous one. So those are the 11 issues. Just a very quick point before we go into the first one, if I may. We recognise, of course, that primary legislation is by its very nature generally high level. Purpose, of course, is to change the law, and therefore the bill only contains the statutory duties and powers required to put in place the new arrangements. And guidance issued by DARD will contain greater detail on how rural needs can be considered by public authorities. For example, guidance on completing a rural proofing assessment. So it was just to refresh our minds on that. The first one is nature of the duty, that's in clause 1, and specifically the nature of the duty, meaning this issue of due regard. Committee members and Chair, you'll recall this was raised. So this is a bit which was requiring public authorities to consider rural needs in their policy development and service delivery. We have that language around to consider. The wording of the duty to consider rural needs shouldn't be read in isolation. It should be considered in the context of the bill taken as part of the whole package. And in terms of the bill itself, the duty to consider rural needs together with the monitoring and reporting arrangements will require departments and councils to consider and be able to clearly demonstrate that they have considered rural needs when they're developing policies and strategies, and they're also delivering public services. And they'll be required to provide information which will be published and laid before the Assembly on how they fulfil this duty. DARD also plans a range of non-legislative measures to support the bill, including revised guidance, I alluded to that a wee moment ago, and training to support public authorities in carrying out their duties. Now, a number of stakeholders in providing written and oral evidence to the committee suggested that the wording of this duty should be amended so that the clause reads, and I quote, "A public authority must have due regard to rural needs when developing, adopting, implementing or revising policy strategies and plans and designing and delivering public services." As I explained in my earlier briefing to the committee back earlier on in November the 3rd, we did consider during the drafting of the bill whether the duty in clause 1 could be framed in terms of again in quotes, due regard to rural needs rather than terms of consideration of needs. And I outlined to the committee at that time that we'd been working on our understanding, based on our legal advices at that time, that a due regard duty was a much higher level of duty that could result in an increased administrative burden on duty holders. This understanding, we've taken it back, consulted again with the legal advice, looked at it again. It's been confirmed again in legal advice that we've obtained since this issue was raised by stakeholders at the evidence session last week. So, as a due regard duty is judiciable, it would also bring with it an increased risk and the associated costs of legal challenges to government policies and decisions. And I think perhaps when I was raising that, I didn't make that crystal clear last time around, but specifically I think it's very important to raise now. Stakeholders, am I to move on to this next bit? Stakeholders have suggested adding wording to clause 1 that would require public authorities to mitigate any adverse impact a policy or strategy may have. And again, this is an issue that we've discussed previously with the committee, and a duty to take mitigating measures would go beyond the aim of this bill. Its aim, the bill's aim, is to ensure that rural needs are considered as an integral part of policy development and service delivery across government, and that any impacts in rural areas are properly assessed so that an informed decision can be made on whether the policy should be adjusted to meet rural needs. However, and this is the distinction, a duty to mitigate would effectively mean that public authorities would be required to undertake their functions in a particular way. This would not only have financial implications for those bodies, but there could be circumstances in which compliance with a duty to mitigate would require a public authority to make a change to policy that would be unlawful, potentially for other reasons, for example, because of European law or human rights obligations. And furthermore, mitigation may not be the only form of action a public authority could take in circumstances where an adverse impact was identified. And for example, it could decide not to proceed with the proposed policy that could cause the adverse impact, or it could take some other form of positive action. So it's for those reasons and that a duty to consider rural needs is included in the bill, rather than a duty to mitigate or to take reasonable steps to mitigate. And my third point, just before I pause, NILGA, this is on the nature of the duty with regard to guidance. NILGA, in its oral evidence, suggested including in the bill an additional requirement for public authorities to have regard to any guidance issued by DARD. And if this is something that the committee would wish to pursue, we would need to consider the implications that this would have and identify the benefits, if any, that it would bring over and above the existing provisions. And I'll pause at that moment, Chair. Very happy to take any questions that members might have in relation to the nature of the duty as outlined in clause 1.
Okay, members. So, in effect, what you're saying a public authority must have regard to is not, you feel is not suitable, or your legal advice?
Our legal advice is, and happy to invite Colette and Astrid to contribute, Chair, but our legal advices have been that it is an increased imposition of duty on the duty holders, and that that could bring with it, and I think this is a key thing. I know it's something that the committee have had an interest in before now, about what might be the administrative, bureaucratic and financial implications of this. So our legal advices have been entirely consistent, and the fact that we brought it back after stakeholders had raised it, and we're getting, perhaps not unexpectedly, but we are getting the same advices. I think that this is something that I needed to err with committee. It certainly seems to be an elevated duty, a more enhanced duty, but it brings with it the corollary, I would say, of additional implications, potentially bureaucratic, administrative and financial.
What you are proposing is a duty to mitigate. Is that what you're proposing? No?
No.
Not really?
No. Again, back into the issue of whether even a duty to mitigate would have been required. Again, that language of mitigate could place a department or a statutory body in a potential conflict position, because that's about taking a particular, that is about being prescriptive or it could be inferred that it is being prescriptive, and you could then find yourself, an authority or department could find itself potentially with a clash between existing law, European human rights law, or other legal duties, and this duty to mitigate. I think the point that I was trying to make was that there are other ways that do not require legislation in which they could look to take positive action, but by articulating that on the face of the bill, it has a very specific implication.
Okay. Members, any other members?
Then how does council deal with Section 75 when you have a diverse people living within a council area who would have the same problem? So how do they get over that?
I'd invite maybe Colette or Rasa I'd like to understand precisely the wording. Forgive me, I understand absolutely the principles of Section 75, but in terms of the requirement that is placed on them, I'm not familiar with the exact wordings. Is it about a duty, due regard, or consider? I understand what you're trying to say, though, in terms of implications.
What the way I read that there is that it'll be down to council to take decision.
Yes.
Now, council can go different ways to take a decision.
Yep.
That it wouldn't have to adhere to what's down in front of them. Right now, I'm sort of skirting around this a wee bit without saying. I'm very careful what I'm saying here, but I think we're giving the council too much latitude here. There's nothing tying them down to really accept rurality. These bigger councils, how do they separate rurality away from the urban way of life? That's what this is all about.
Yes.
So,
Well, my take, and I would invite colleagues to chip in, Ms McMullen, to maybe support my answer to you. My understanding was that in considering the needs of rural dwellers, this is a requirement which means that the local authority, and that's specifically what you're interested in at the moment, has to consider in any decision that it is making that it must consider the needs of the rural dweller, the rural person, in the design of its policy and the implementation of those policies in a way. What we're not doing, what DARD is not proposing by the current wording, is to prescribe how any local authority or how any government department should exactly do that. But we are requiring them that they must evidence not only the fact that they have taken account of the needs of rural dwellers in the development and implementation of their policies and services, but they also must be able to demonstrate not only that they've done it, but they must evidence how they've done it. And that's the bit that the collation of the information, which is another duty and another power later on in the bill, would actually then be able to draw that information together in order to hold them to account. Sorry, Chair, may I bring Colette in to support that answer, if that's okay?
I think, there will be a duty on, the bill will put a duty on departments and on councils to consider rural needs. And so there will be that duty on them. That's a statutory duty to do it. They will have to be able to report on what they have done as well, and to demonstrate that they have considered rural needs. So it's going to be a duty as opposed to something that they can choose to do or not to do. Certainly, the overall intention of the bill is to make this just a part of a norm and embed this as part of the routine way that councils and departments go about considering and designing policies and making decisions about services. So I think in terms of the difference, and we spoke about, we had looked at the use of the term due regard, and that would be a higher level duty. And so, where we have been looking is in weighing up really the balance of how this bill can deliver benefits of getting into place an embedded way of considering rural needs against the potential costs, the administrative burden of doing that. And the due regard duty would be a more onerous duty, and a more administratively burdensome duty. And in weighing those up, we believe in the bill as it's drafted that that can be achieved, the benefits can be achieved through using consider.
I'm only going to be what here, both Nulga and Solus both came out with due regard. They were happy enough with that. They said it's workable. They didn't see a problem with it. Considering the rare white papers out there since 2002, there's no evidence the rare white paper being taken due regard of, or anyway at all. Council ticked the box, moved on. Nothing has changed. This bill is all about is getting that change.
I think that this is the first time this will actually extend. Rural proofing's been a commitment since 2002 on departments, but that hasn't extended to councils before.
No,
So part of this bill is actually rolling that, extending it beyond departments. So it will be councils doing this really, I suppose, for the first time, but doing this as part of what's timing's good on this because would be doing this as part of their progressive planning. So there's an opportunity for them to start to build that in now as part of their new process.
Okay.
All right. Joe Byrne.
Mr. Chairman, I would be concerned that if the department sticks to the phrase must consider rural needs, then it's a fatal flaw. Meaning, in fact, the bill would lead to. I think the whole essence of the rural proofing bill is to bring in something that's meaningful and is going to be challenging to this department and other departments to make sure that we have a statutory basis for meaningful rural needs being addressed. So I have to say, Chairman, given the consideration that other bodies like SOLAS and NILGA and ourselves and others have made about having a meaningful bill, I would request that the department give due consideration to the most important sentences in the whole bill in relation to the meaning of the progress that is required, because otherwise I think we're going to have a very half-baked bill that will not have the desired consequences.
I appreciate that comment, and certainly happy to bring that back. Might I just say, and I should have said it at an earlier point in my introductory comments, that clearly we've brought this information, all of the information as to what the stakeholders have been saying to date and the issues that have been aired to the Minister who's considering things at the moment. But I think that we will, any comments that the committee make today, we will wish to conduct that back to Minister as quickly as we can.
And Chairman, can I further just clarify, Louise, I think you said that the concern that the department would have would be in relation to the legal implications and the resource implications.
The legal advices, it was based on that we understood the distinction between the two types of duty, and the legal advices were pointing out that the due regard duty had greater administrative, potentially resource implications, and possibly administrative as well. So that there was a corollary of the higher threshold of the other duty.
Well, Chairman, I think that the higher threshold is really the aim that we should be pursuing. Otherwise, I think we're going to be accused by future generations of missing the trick when we have an opportunity to do something relevant and meaningful. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
On the same issue?
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, it's just the same. Thank you, Chair. I would follow on from Joe here. You know, he tells us we can't use the language due regard because of an extra administrative burden or financial implications, whatever, Louise, you know. But this bill is going to have to, this rural needs bill, we talk about giving it teeth. I'm concerned that by not being able to put this, these words in and talk about putting or leaving consider, you know, is that giving it, what you're really telling us is has a lesser effect by using that language instead of giving it teeth by using due regard. Could you explain that to me, why maybe you want to go down this line, the department wants to go down this line?
Well, I think in the original consideration of it, and sorry, in terms of the earlier question from the previous member asking about was there a legal implication, of course I had said that, and that was that if the duty of due regard is could be subject to judicial review, that could bring with it an increased risk, and again that might have financial implications of legal challenges to government policies and decisions. So I think legal advices are often they're designed to give you the full picture, including the potential for the level of risk that government and local authorities, of course, might be exposed to. And it was in weighing up the balance.
Do you think this is a legally high level of risk?
A high level?
Yeah.
Well, it has been repeated. It has been repeated. It elevates this by placing this duty. I invite colleagues who've spoken directly with DSO in particular on this to comment. What DSO though was absolutely telling us was you have an increased risk. That is an increased threshold. There's a higher level of duty, and there's an increased risk of that risk of legal challenge. And I suppose ultimately this is a decision, and this is the power of bringing it to the committee about the testing of the waters as to whether you put something on the statute books, and actually if the implications of it are that there will be further challenges to government through judicial review, potentially, is that what is desired, when the objective was about trying to ensure that how we conducted and how we made the analysis and reflection and undertaking and the commitment to reflect rural needs in the development of policies and the development of and delivery of services, is that a level of risk that government is prepared to live with.
So how is that level of risk lessened if we use consider? Because is it giving the bill maybe an out here that has got less teeth? That's what I'm trying to think. If we use that risk, it's not there by using consider.
Consider has a different legal. It's the legal interpretation of what that means. It's yes, of what that means. And it is, as I say, go back to this.
But by using it, would you not agree it gives it less effective and less effectiveness of the bill by using that, getting away from the legalities of it? Okay,
clearly the impact could potentially be stronger in terms of the language. Due regard carries a higher threshold and potentially a heavier weight, including a higher risk. So the implications of that have to be weighed up in the balance of placing a statutory duty at all in the first place. So if the objective was about putting rural needs and the needs of rural dwellers firmly on the map, clearly something the Executive wanted, 2002, 2009, so I was saying placing that statutory duty, then is that an important and efficient way of doing it, by saying consider, because first of all you are placing the statutory duty, or do you want to go even higher than that and say that the level of the duty has to be framed in the language of due regard, and with that comes the attendant risk. And I think that it is that balancing act, and that has been a balancing act, and that's something which we're in bringing in when the Minister brought her policy and consulted on it, having weighed all of that up, went with at that point the issue of consider, using that phrase because of what that connoted. I don't know, Chair, whether you'd like any other colleagues to help complement that answer I've sought to give you, Mr. Addison.
I think you've explained that quite well, Louise. With the higher level of effectiveness, with the terminology here, you're telling us we run legally with a higher risk.
Potentially. And so that's a very important issue to consider. But I'm hearing around the table the challenges around the rigour around that, the rigour of the higher duty, and how perhaps some members are certainly feeling now, actually, was that the desirable thing if you're really going to make an impact with the bill?
Impact, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, members. Okay.
Are you happy if I keep going,
Yeah,
Chair?
keep on, yeah.
I have to figure out where I am in my notes. So the next area then is the inclusion of other public authorities from the outset. That issue is the call by a number of stakeholders for the inclusion of other public authorities in addition to departments and district councils actually on the face of the bill. And this particular issue was also raised during the second stage debate. And as we've explained in previous briefings on the bill's provisions, one of the reasons the bill was drafted to include a power for DARD to extend the bill to other public authorities at a later stage rather than specifying them in the bill is to allow for further consultation on which other public authorities should be included and from when, and so which ones and the date point from which they would be included. And this would also allow the new arrangements to embed effectively in central and local government before extending them further to other public authorities. And as a result, other bodies would have a reasonable time to prepare for the introduction of the new statutory duties to be placed upon them. Now, the comments from stakeholders support the extension of the duty to other public bodies. What they've asked about is the possibility of including other authorities on the face of the bill actually from the outset. And the committee will be aware that this issue was raised during the second stage debate on the bill, and the Minister has indicated that she would be open to considering the issue further. So that's the latest update on that. So very happy to take any questions members might wish to have on that.
Joe Byrne.
Chairman, well, I think again, this stipulation about the type of body that's going to be required to address the issue is crucially important. And last week I raised the issue about the whole voluntary and community sector that has been involved in partnerships very often with service level provision, for example, for the elderly, and some preschool provision, and also the rural community transport partnerships. Is there any way we can encompass that role that has developed almost in a haphazard way, but it's providing a very important function and service in the rural communities? And I'm worried that they're going to get, pardon the expression, shackled if we don't in some way give consideration to have a widening definition of the bodies going to be charged with delivering rural needs service.
I think that there's a specific interpretation you're making here, Mr. Byrne, around what, you know, extending the duty on to other partners, other statutory partners, and that the purpose, the intent of the bill was around placing a duty and a requirement on departments and local authorities and potentially on other public bodies. Now, we know that there's a list of statutory bodies who would be considered partnership bodies. I think that the Department of the Committee for the Environment is looking at the moment, so there's a list from that other bill going through. As somebody who used to work for a long time in the voluntary sector, I'm struggling to understand that. I understand the principle of including the third sector as a very important delivery mechanism, but this would risk placing a duty on NGOs, voluntary organisations, to demonstrate in how they shape policy and delivery of their services, how they're taking account of rural needs. I think that a bit like, it takes me back to the conversations we had around how did you work with the private sector, you know, how could we influence, what would be the remit of this bill and how could it possibly influence, say, the behaviours of private business in terms of their appearance and their support and visibility within and contribution that we make within rural communities. My concern is that, coming from a perspective of wanting to put our arms around the NGOs and I have a great respect for the sector, that actually there would be quite serious implications for that sector around what the implications of placing a duty on them would mean in the first instance. And number two, I have to confess, I do even wonder whether it would be possible to do it. So I'm unsighted on that bit. I understand the spirit of the question, but I'm not sure that this measure, this duty, is the appropriate vehicle.
Yes, no, I recognise, Louise, what you're saying, and I accept the sort of the haze of uncertainty in relation to this. However, in terms of the reality of what has been happening over the last 20 years, in terms of rural services and provision, we have to give some recognition in some way to those voluntary community groups or partnerships that have done good work, very often getting some grant aid from government departments or councils, and they've developed an infrastructure and service provision that's very relevant at a local level. Can I make a comment, however? This is where I certainly believe that the voluntary and community sector contribution has to be recognised, at least in a baseline assessment, in relation to the resourcing that has gone on in the past and in relation to the infrastructure that has been established, because if we hadn't had that voluntary and community sector getting involved on a needs basis and on a service basis, then we would be in a much worse position than we're in, and we want to get to a better position relative to the current position that we're now in as a consequence of this bill.
And I understand that, and I think the and recognition of voluntary and community organisations, the contribution they make to rural communities and delivery of services in partnership with statutory bodies is very significant. I go back to my point. I'm not sure that in seeking to acknowledge and pay respect to the third sector, as I call it, in that way, that the measure and the duty that we're talking about, the bill that we want to place on departments and local authorities and other public bodies, is the right way to do that. Having said that, I do recognise, and it was something that came out of the stakeholder comments, that the stakeholders, the rural community, voluntary and community organisations, will be very important in terms of being actively involved in how this bill is given life, how the Act is enacted, because they will be the people who will take an active role, I would not doubt, in doing their own monitoring and holding other departments and local authorities and other bodies to account. And I think it's about so I think that they will have a very distinctive role to play from their tremendous knowledge of the needs of rural dwellers to be able to contribute to the monitoring and indeed contributing to the evaluation. And if this bill is successfully makes it onto the statute book, no doubt when it comes to be reviewed, they would be exactly the part of the constituency that would need to be involved in reviewing the efficacy of the Act.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Declan.
Thank you, Chair. See, in the bill, obviously, it applies to government departments and councils, but we have a situation that some, or indeed for some departments, most of their functions are discharged by ALBs. How would it make sense that the bill only applies to the department but not to the ALB, for example, discharge perhaps most of the responsibilities of that department?
Well, I think what we were seeking to do was to make provision for the other non-departmental public bodies to be added to it, and let's hopefully just open up the page that where we were already looking at what other bodies might be involved. The list that I have in front of me, I suspect, bears a very close resemblance to a list that is being scrutinised by another committee at the moment. But we had asked in our consultation around what other bodies that might be involved. So, Education Authority, Health and Social Care Trusts on the board, Public Health Agency, PSNI, Housing Executive, Fire and Rescue Service, Invest NI, Arts Council, Tourism NI, Sport NI, and Commissioner for Older People for NI as well. So there was quite a range was brought up, and I think that's the weighing up just at the moment as to whether the proposal is to bring forward a list right from the get-go that appears on the face of the bill, or to allow, but those organisations themselves were not individually consulted, nor were other ALBs. For instance, I don't believe our own largest ALB, AFBI, was specifically consulted. So there may be issues around that. That's not to say it couldn't happen, but I think the point was we were making provision that those could be added at a later date. Is that right, Fled?
No, that's right. And I mean, some of them, as part of the consultation, came back and said, we're already doing this on a voluntary basis anyway, and we'd be happy to be included on the face of the bill. But not all ALBs came back. So that was the thinking in terms of having a power in to extend the provision later, because there'd be a wider consultation. And I suppose for those organisations who weren't already doing it, that sort of extension would allow time for them to prepare and get ready to start doing it. That's the thinking, the existing provision in the bill.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I suppose that leads on to the next question. You know, rural proofing has been around from 2002, so most of those organisations, all of them, should be aware of what it entails. What was the reason for not including some of the organisations that you've already referenced there? And if they believe it'll take them time to work out how this will impact upon their decision making and their policy development, is there any merit in looking at the possibility of the clause or the bill impacting on them at a later stage once they would get their heads around what's required of them?
That certainly is a potential option in terms of the date at which it could be, you know, if a list were to appear on the face of the bill, but I'm sure there could be an issue about when it might then come into effect. I think that could very well be an option.
I mean, the commencement, you know, the commencement of a particular provision can be something that can be provided for in the bill just when we commence different parts. I suppose where we concluded after the consultation was that this would be, what we'd provide in the bill was the power to extend. So as it stands, that's what is in the bill currently. I suppose there would be a question then of, if you were, for example, if you were to explore listing arm's length bodies on the face of the bill from the outset, which ones do you include and which ones do you not? So there's a question of, is it you know, because there are a huge number of them, are some more relevant than others, and that might be the question. So again, there's, you know, and there are different sort of ways you could look at that. And is it about thinking of those who have more likely to be considering rural issues or to have impact on rural issues? There isn't a definitive list, I think, Astrid. I mean, I know that sort of approach has been considered as part of the local government and establishing community planning process. And for example, there has been some work done on the identifying the NDPs who might be community planning partners. I think there's some work done there. Is that an appropriate approach to take, or is there a different way of doing it for rural needs build? So there are areas, I suppose, that we haven't, because we haven't gone down that road, would still have to be considered if that was something that you were exploring.
Chair, just a final point then. Well, obviously you'll know from the evidence we've gathered from the stakeholders that there's a very strong view this bill is as strong and as wide-ranging from the outset. It's unanimous from what we picked up, and that was one of the key issues that was raised. And surely the fact that the bill will apply to all government departments, and surely the rationale is that it should apply to all or most of their arm-length bodies.
As an extension of that. Absolutely, and I take that point. Very happy to take those additional comments back, specifically on the issue of the extension to ALBs and on the automatically, and also on the issue of if there is an issue around the potential timing for, you know, the application to be commenced. I think one issue just that's on my mind is not inputting a list on the face of the bill. That one would want to make sure that if that list needed to be added to, or that there was some other provision that it could be added to, but so that the list itself may be the best list, the most appropriate list as it would be now, but it clearly wouldn't be exhaustive to cover every eventuality because things change in the future.
But presuming the subordinate legislation would
It
reflect
could promote
to
that.
extent.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
Chair.
And I mean, there is no way of including them without putting each one individually by name, no, probably not. If you understand them.
Yeah,
Yes.
as far as I know, that it has to be.
It's
I think there was how many did I rattle off there? About 12 or 13, and I think they would all have to appear as is.
But where do you draw the line? It could be more, you know, if you went into each one, there's probably more than 12 or 15. There's quite a number, I'm
exactly.
thinking.
I mean, I think in looking at this, and we had looked at this, there isn't a specific definition, perhaps Astrid can come in, but there isn't a specific definition of an arm's length body. Astrid?
Yeah, we had looked at and discussed the possibility of, you know, sort of generic term for arm's length bodies or non-departmental public bodies, but I understand there's no sort of legal definition of what those bodies would be. So if we got into that, we would have to be defining what we meant by non-departmental public bodies, which brings us back to where we are.
List.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any other members? Before we,
Okay.
we don't know.
Should I just keep going?
Okay.
Next one was on the issue of lack of teeth, enforcement mechanism and sanctions. We've outlined before how the monitoring and reporting arrangements that are going to be provided for the bill are intended to ensure that public authorities provide information on how they've complied with their duty, and this information would be made available for scrutiny by the Assembly and its committees. The Department will work with public authorities in designing the content and format of the annual monitoring report to make sure that it's meaningful and that it is a full account of how they have discharged their duty to consider rural needs. The report will be the means by which the Assembly can hold public authorities to account, and essentially the proposed reporting requirements are the teeth within the bill, and any sanction would be clearly within the hands of the Assembly. It's difficult to envisage what would be an appropriate sanction on public authorities should they fail to comply with their duties under the legislation. It certainly wouldn't be appropriate to include a power in the bill for DARD itself or DAERA of the future to sanction them, and our legal advice has confirmed that to be the case. So the monitoring and reporting arrangements within the bill would be supported by non-legislative measures, and we've previously, when we've been talking to the committee, we've advised you that we believe that the cost of establishing a new enforcement mechanism or an independent monitoring body would probably be prohibitive and unjustifiable given the fiscal environment that we're in at the moment, and also particularly given the existing routes of redress that are available. But I think important to highlight in our response to the public consultation on the policy proposals for the bill that we did give a commitment to consider how an element of independence could be incorporated into the process, and we would want to take that forward in developing the implementation arrangements for the bill. For example, we would wish to explore how the Interdepartmental Committee on Rural Policy can play a role and how best to incorporate stakeholder engagement into the new arrangements. It's something that I referred to in a previous answer to Mr Byrne. So that's kind of where I've got to on the enforcement mechanisms, sanctions and issue of lack of teeth. I keep on going back to the point, Chair, of, you know, this report is coming up, laid before the Assembly. I would imagine that the committees, all the relevant committees, would be very interested in terms of working through it and about seeing the implications about how their department has performed and what they've done. So it's using our existing democratic mechanisms here of government and governance.
Yeah, I suppose in effect it is probably quite difficult to hold councils to. You expect public bodies to deliver as legislation. You know, you do expect that, and how you hold them to account is not that easy, I suppose, other than have some other body set up, which, as you say,
And then, you know, and it was floated earlier on, you know, might there be a separate organisation set up to do it? I appreciate, from what I can read across the political spectrum, that has not been an appetite to set up a discrete organisation to seek to try and do that. So it has been looking, I think our challenge has been about looking to see how we could do that best. Clearly the department with the sponsorship role for our local authorities across, it would clearly have a very particular interest then in how its local authorities are doing.
yeah. Okay, Oliver, do you want?
Just very quickly, Chair, where does the role of the government auditor come in then? Would he play a role in this? Or
Yes.
He or she, sorry.
In terms of the NIAO,
Yeah, and making sure councils live up to what they're supposed to do, and they
I think in terms of my broader experience, very often when I've been involved in the NIO or any of the reports, it's usually been about the deployment of financial resources most closely and most attended. So that's certainly something worth exploring.
Yeah.
We did raise in previous discussion sessions, of course, that any citizen who felt that who wanted to take a challenge, their first port of call, say with a government department, would be with that department or with a local authority. If they did not feel that they were getting if they felt that there was maladministration, that next port of call is the Ombudsman. So we could trace an issue in terms of in the nature of accountability and redress if one was seeking redress.
And the last thing, Chair, when we talk about all these other bodies, what about devolved bodies?
And sorry.
Devolved matters that would affect councils, such as the matters that are devolved from Westminster to here that affect councils.
And sorry, just to make sure that I understand what you're saying, Mr. McMullen, are you saying about how a matter that would be devolved would be taken account of by Well, I think if it's a devolved matter and it's something which is being either policies being developed on it or it's operationalised by a department or a local authority, it sits within the day-to-day policy and delivery arrangements for that.
Would it be answerable to the local authority, or who would it be answerable to?
I suspect that it would depend on. I'm trying to get a texture of it. If you had an example for me, I might
example,
be more helpful.
On planning issues there, on fracking, on gas exploration, things like that there, I would call in devolved matters.
Well, I think if it falls within the ambit of a government department and how it was taking that forward and implementing that, shaping its policy and implementing it on the ground, and how it worked with its statutory partners in any shape or form of doing it, then that would all be subject to the statutory duty that is seeking to do.
That's good. So if that's put in there.
Yeah, I think certainly that is my interpretation. I'm very happy to seek a specific piece of legal advice for you on that, but that, I suppose what I'm saying is anything that's within a department's remit is subject to this level threshold.
Thank you.
Okay, any other?
I'll try and speed up, Chair, in terms of my comments on the notes. Next one then was on the scope of the duty in clause 1. That was were suggested by a number of stakeholders that this clause should be amended to include the word monitoring of policy strategies and plans in addition to the developing, adopting, implementing or revising of them. We considered that monitoring suggests an ongoing activity rather than a function to be undertaken at the time of policy development or review. So its inclusion in the scope of the duty in clause 1 is likely to create further administrative burden on public authorities. Stakeholders also suggested that clause 1 should explicitly refer to budgets in addition to policy strategies and plans, and the public consultation document on the policy proposals for the bill made clear that one of the policy objectives of this bill is to ensure that rural issues are embedded in the development and delivery of all government strategies and policies, including spending plans. So it's our understanding, based on that analysis, that Clause 1, as it's drafted, already does provide for the duty to consider the rural needs to apply in relation to spending plans and budgets. And a further issue regarding the scope of the duty in Clause 1 was raised in written evidence to the committee. The Probation Board for Northern Ireland was of the view that the duty should not apply to all policies within an organisation. It suggested, meaning the Probation Board suggested, that the duty should be targeted at policies that affect the design and delivery of public services. One of the policy intentions of the bill is to ensure that rural issues are embedded in the development and delivery of all government strategies and policies and the delivery of public services. So we think that the word used in Clause 1 does reflect that in intention. I think we were just trying to pick out this is being very precise, you know, the language about monitoring, the language around budgets, and I think we believe, in having looked at all of that the proposed clause is sufficient to the requirement.
Okay. Okay, members.
Keep going.
You want the next one?
Next one then is issues around guidance, information and advice and the provision of training. This is about the power in Clause 2A. Some stakeholders suggested that the proposed power for DAR to take steps to provide guidance, advice and information on issues connected with rural needs should be a duty rather than an enabling power. It's important to highlight that the enabling power in Clause 2A is in relation to DARD providing guidance, advice and information to any person about issues connected with rural needs or ways of meeting those needs. Therefore, it's much broader in scope than a power to provide those particular public authorities that are affected by the bill with guidance, advice and information on the exercise of their statutory duties. A duty on DARD is distinct from a power to provide any person guidance, advice and information on a wide range of matters connected with rural needs is therefore likely to have significant resourcing implications for us. So DARA on DARD, UB DARA, I think there's a reality check about the implications it would have for the department. It may also perpetuate the current situation by rural issues are seen solely as DARD's responsibility, and I do feel that that is very important to draw to members' attention, because this is about making the issues of rural dwellers and rural needs a matter for all across government and not about keeping it in a silo in one government department. As currently drafted, DARD intends to use this power to issue guidance for public authorities, specifically in the issue of their functions under the bill. Any such guidance could also provide the means of clarifying the terminology used in the bill, which was a further issue highlighted by some stakeholders, and I'm going to come back to that shortly. However, as a broader power, it provides DARD with the scope to provide advice to any person about issues connected with rural needs, and I don't think we would want to lose that flexibility that the provision provides. The other issue that stakeholders raised in relation to Clause 2A was a suggestion that it should also refer to the provision of training in addition to the provision of guidance, advice and information. And again, given that the clause empowers DARD to provide support to any person, the addition of training here could have significant resourcing implications in that it could oblige DARD to meet the cost of providing any such training. So you know, we did not want that. I don't feel that was appropriate to add that may have been an unintended consequence with clearly resourcing implications. We do acknowledge stakeholders' concerns about the availability of training to coincide with commencement of the legislation. That's a very legitimate concern that stakeholders have. The position with the existing training is that DARD develop the content of with involvement of stakeholders, and it's delivered through the Centre for Applied Learning, CAL, where it's delivered to all the departments. So we'd imagine that we would have a similar arrangement to apply in the future. So DARD would be responsible for developing the content of the training to assist public authorities in carrying out their duties, but wouldn't itself be responsible for the actual delivery of the training. So sorry that it's quite a specific little point, but I think it's important, and you can see a red flag coming up on behalf of DARD, becoming DARE, you know, concerns there that what might be the implications. Every single word has an impact, and the enhancement of that word or the addition of the word, in this case, our concern is around what additional implications it would have resourcing wise.
Okay. Members clear on that? Okay.
Rattling on, Chair, transparency of reporting arrangements. There was a concern about the transparency of the arrangements of reporting on the consideration of rural needs. They're provided for in Clause 3. I've already mentioned the requirement for DAR to compile information provided by public authorities and to prepare an annual report to be laid before the Assembly. Several stakeholders believed that this arrangement would not ensure the level of transparency and accountability they were seeking. They suggested an amendment that would provide for the Minister to make an annual statement in the Assembly on the impact of the bill. While in principle a revision could be included in the bill for a ministerial statement to be made at the time of the monitoring report being laid before the Assembly, our legal advice is that it would not be appropriate for the bill to specify that a statement should cover the impact of the bill, as was suggested, particularly as this would require judgment to be made on the extent to which public authorities had discharged their duties under the legislation. This would go beyond the intended monitoring and reporting arrangements, which focus on scrutiny by the Assembly and its committees, and could create a false accountability of public authorities to DARD. It's always been the policy intention that the annual monitoring report would be made publicly available, as well as being laid in the Assembly Library, and I hope that helps members understand that we're trying to address stakeholders' concerns about the availability and transparency of the information. I think a little bit back, I did reflect that earlier on about this issue about so the only people interested in rural issues will be DARD, which will become DAERA. I think that there is a nuance in here which I would want to draw to members' attention, that by requiring the Minister of that department to make a judgment call on that, that's by making that a statement, that it is giving it a particular colour in terms of that view, as opposed to trying to. This is the business of all government departments. It is therefore of interest to all committees and to the Assembly in its totality. So just to try and clarify the words I've read out.
I think the thought behind that was that, it is help, it helps in regard that, if there is an annual, the Minister has to come annually to the Assembly, we find out how it is working.
Yep.
And other than something to let members know how it is developing and how it is delivering, I think. How do we see that tangible on the ground if we don't know?
Okay. Well, I think in terms of the nuance, I think we were just being scrupulous around the nuance of the Minister for DARD era to be making his or her commentary, and people thinking, i.e. public authorities thinking, that their reporting mechanism purely was through to that department, the department. Happy to continue to consider, of course, all of these issues at the request of committee. We will continue to examine them and tease that out. I think it was a particular interpretation, and I just wanted to flag that it did give pause for thought.
Okay. Declan McAleer.
Sorry.
Support you said there, Chair, and I think even from reading the notes from the stakeholder forum last year, transparency is a very, very key issue, which they want to see. And given the fact that certainly in these islands and maybe across Europe, this is the first really that we're putting rural proofing on a statutory basis, and I don't think and DARD is the agency, the department that's bringing this forward. Mm-hmm. I still feel to see how the Minister. I do believe that in the interest of transparency, that it should be possible for the Minister to make some sort of a statement, maybe not casting judgment so much on the progress or other, but just give an update on all that. And given the fact that a lot of the information will be provided by the departments and the councils and any other bodies anyhow, I think the statement could reflect a synopsis of all of that there, as to where the bill is at any given time. Okay.
Well, can I say that was our legal advice, which was legal advice was not appropriate in the context of that. Whether legal advice is exactly that, it's legal advice, and it's still up to the Minister to take that, to develop her own view on that specific area. again, happy, but I'm conscious of time, but happy to take that one away. And perhaps I'm sensing within committee that still bears further scrutiny. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Joe Byrne. Joe.
Chairman,
I beg your pardon, Mr. Byrne.
Comment over here.
I want to recognise Melody of made comment on this, and so has Derry City Council, Band Council, and the ABC, and Armagh, Banbridge, and Gavin. I think they're expressing sentiments about trying to make sure that there's an effective ongoing appraisal by the department, and obviously the annual statement in the Assembly is crucial, so that members have a chance to make comment on how the bill is being implemented and progress. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's helpful. You'll be relieved to hear, Chair, that the paragraphs are getting shorter and the clauses perhaps are less contentious. Purpose of the proposed cooperation arrangements. An issue with the cooperation arrangements in clause 4 was raised in one of the research papers presented to the committee last week. This clause places a duty on DARD to make arrangements with public authorities to secure cooperation and the exchange of information. The research paper highlighted that the purpose of this duty wasn't explicit in the bill, and it was suggested that further clarity was needed as to what end or benefit the proposed cooperation and information sharing arrangements were to be made. We believe that this was already sufficiently clear, that the intention of clause 4 relates to the primary duty contained within clause 1, that is the duty to contain rural needs. I suppose there's a bit about, it's quite a short bill, not very many clauses, and I think our legal advisors would have suggested that was connectable enough, to use a coin a new word. Colette, maybe briefly, Chair, if Colette might add a little bit to that. Anything?
Yeah.
I think that's right, that the whole purpose of this bill is to impose a duty on public authorities to consider rural needs and for connected purposes. So that is what the bill is about. So legal advice being that any clause in it relates to that purpose, and clause 1, the duty on public authorities to consider rural needs being the primary duty there.
Yeah.
Next one, terminology used in the bill, lack of definitions. Terminology included in the bill was another issue raised by some stakeholders. A number of them suggested that greater clarity was needed in relation to what was meant by some of the terms used, including rural area, rural needs, revising policies, designing and delivering services. As we've outlined to the committee previously, while some terms have been defined in the bill, others, including the definition of rural area, haven't been included, as these definitions are likely to change over time. DARD will produce and issue guidance that will provide further clarification on the meaning of terms used in the bill, and we will also engage with public authorities in developing this guidance to help ensure it will assist them in discharging their new duties. So I think the point is we're happy to bring forward that guidance and support on those terms, and hopefully that will allay any worries that folk have around that. Those precise terms.
Yeah. Okay, members.
Just on that, on the rural needs and the clarification, some of those there, like the noble indices, for example, they've been looked at now the minute they could change. The councils, whenever they put their policy in and planning, on what they call rural areas for rural planning, that would have an effect on that there.
And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that we would want to take account of in providing the supporting advice and guidance. Yeah, thank you. For that, we're on the penultimate issue. Review of the bill and baseline to measure effectiveness of the bill. This was an issue that was raised by one of the researchers last week when he highlighted that there was no explicit commitment to review contained within the bill's text. Our understanding is that it's not necessary to make specific provision for review within the text of the bill itself, and that primary legislation can be reviewed at any time. However, we can clarify that it is intended to evaluate the effectiveness of this legislation at an important time, and I know, having from discussions with the Minister's entirely committed to that. We would also be exploring ways in which the effectiveness of the bill can be evaluated. One measure that was suggested last week was to establish a baseline in relation to the quantum amount of money spent by public authorities on meeting rural needs. The Department notes the importance of establishing a baseline in order to measure the effectiveness of the bill. Not but we don't believe that measuring public expenditure on an urban-rural basis is perhaps the most effective way of doing this, because there could be difficulties in attributing spend to urban or rural areas, so if you're looking at regional services. So it's specific policies across government and how these are implemented that are going to be determining outcomes in rural areas, for example, health or education or transport. So it's intended that the rural proofing process will capture the intended outcomes of a policy so that they can be monitored. DARD currently maintains a rural statistics webpage on its website. We draw together their data from a range of sources, including the census, surveys and databases right across government, and analyses on data on an urban-rural basis. And I think that this would be very important to draw upon. This includes outcomes in relation to health, crime, education, employment, and which would clearly be of interest to public authorities and rural stakeholders. And in addition, we would consider, as part of the developments of the new guidance and the reporting template for the new arrangements, how the impact of rural proofing can be best measured at an individual policy level. So I appreciate that that was something that was a significant issue raised by committee members, and about how do you establish that baseline, the sources of information that you have. I think it was just a point on that the money wasn't the only way to analyse it. One of a number of indicators.
Yeah. Joe Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I welcome the recognition that some sort of a baseline assessment is important. I would encourage the department to concentrate on this to make sure that we get the whole starting on the right footing, and making sure that we retain the confidence of the rural communities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, just quickly, I would agree with what you're saying there, because what we don't want to see is this thing getting burdened down with red tape, how much you're spending in every department, and know what it's like in local authorities. And you have to widen that out to police, you'd have to widen it out to every service that's in the rural area. It would take more than a year to get that done. So no, I think we have to look at other ways of looking at that there. I think a lot of the things to gauge it on are already there.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them are already there. You take the rural development programme, for example.
Yes.
There's indicators in there. That's how these things work in the rural area.
Yeah.
We have a lot of it there.
I think that this is about using sources of data and information in as clever and as cohesive a way as we can, and I think we will turn our minds to that with supportive partners. But we'll write a lot on our own within DARD itself, with lots of great sources.
I think it's now a time, Chair, to use that information maybe of the Mara project. There's a lot of information in there.
Yeah.
Can be used. No,
Thank you.
very good.
Thank you for that. Final one was a very final point, Chair. Final issue that we picked up from last week's meeting relates to the closure of rural schools. This issue was also highlighted during the second stage debate on the bill. There was a suggestion that there may be scope to make provision within this bill for the rural proofing of decisions on school closures in order to bring us into line with other parts of the UK. The aim of the bill is to ensure consideration of rural needs is integral to policy development, service delivery across all functions of government, and therefore it doesn't legislate for rural proofing in relation to any specific policy areas or types of decision. And while the bill will require public authorities to consider rural needs when they are taking decisions affecting schools, clearly that would be a matter for the Department of Education and, of course, once the NDPBs come aboard ESA. We don't consider that it is an appropriate vehicle for legislating for specific protection for rural schools. So, I mean, it is a generic provision by placing the duty on the statutory authority, by potentially whether it appears on the face of it or in a provision to enable the NDPB to be enacted later on. You'd have two big links to education through that, so it would be through that route effectively if it was that the legislation would have impact. So I do appreciate, Chair, very finally, we haven't covered absolutely every single issue. I think we've given, it's like the 12 days of Christmas, we've got 11 issues here. We've covered them as best we can, I hope, and very appreciative of your time. But if there's anything else that members would like to raise, of course we'll take that away, and we've listened intently to all that members have said and areas of concern.
Okay. Any other members before? Any comment? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much once again, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Before we move off the ruling needs bill, can I refer members to the correspondence from the examiner, statutory rules, delegated powers in the bill at page 89. The examiner has indicated that the order making power, as explained by the department in its delegated powers memorandum, seems to be appropriate and subject to the appropriate degree of assembly control. It is subject to draft affirmative procedure. Are members content with this position? Okay, members?
Yeah.
I remind members that next week we'll be doing the informal clause by clause. This will be a final opportunity for the committee to consider its position on the key issues and decide if it requires amendments. Okay. Agenda item 8, oral briefing from me is inquiry into better regulation. Can I refer members to the briefing paper on the review of decision process at page 91 to 106 in the paper on the cross compliance in a tabled paper pack. Can I welcome Mark Allen, our Assembly researcher. Mark, you're very welcome, and we'll let you do your presentation and we'll ask some questions.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose I have two papers to cover today, so I'll try and get through these as quickly as I can. I suppose it's maybe useful to take them together. One of these has been tabled previously, like 3-4 weeks ago, but the two papers, I suppose, there are common and overlapping themes within them. This is the first paper, I suppose, I want to cover on cross-compliance standards and inspection processes. It's a very general overview, I suppose, in this context, but I think it maybe provides some of the information, some of the potential questions the committee had. I suppose not wishing to patronise members, many of you are aware of it and are subject to it, but I suppose in its most basic term, cross-compliance is a key feature of the Common Agricultural Policy, both Pillars 1 and Pillar 2. I suppose it really effectively means that anyone claiming support under either Pillar 1 or Pillar 2 is required to meet a series of requirements towards the protection of the environment, animal health and welfare and public health. In terms of the CAP programmes that the cross-compliance requirements actually apply to, I have those set out in the paper. You can see the range of them, both ones that are active now in 2015 and ones that have carried over from the previous CAP period. It should also be said, I suppose that the primary interest that members had was that obviously the basic payment scheme falls within this, which is the biggie in terms of numbers. In terms of legislation, I'm not going to go into it in any great detail. It's set out within the paper. You can see it there. There's EU Commission implementing regulation. There's a regulation. There's a Commission implementing regulation, and there's a Commission delegated regulation. And I've gone into some of the details provided in those. In terms of Northern Ireland specifically, we have the Common Agricultural Policy Direct Payments and Support Schemes cross-compliance regulations from 2014, and there has, I think, been a recent update to those as well, but they're in the paper. But what I've tried to do and summarise in Table 1 within the paper is give you an idea as to what is actually required. Getting down to, I suppose, what this actually means in practical terms, the cross-compliance requirements, there are effectively two types. There are the statutory management rules, the SMRs, of which there are 13 within the current CAP. And then there are the Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions Standards, and there are currently 7. SMRs and GAECs, I'll refer to them as that from now. I suppose the distinction I want to make on those is that SMRs are effectively fixed. There isn't a lot of opportunity for variation here. In fact, there's none. They are set, so they apply across the EU. Whereas the GAECs, member states and regions within them, such for example in our experience in the UK between Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales, there is the opportunity to effectively adapt the GAEC standards to meet your own particular environmental conditions or concerns or opportunities or circumstance. Pages 63 to 92 in the paper actually summarise the standards that are available, that are applied in Northern Ireland. That's within the appendix. And I've also put in there in terms of what you can actually expect in terms of inspection. I have to say a lot of information is lifted really from the DARD Verifiable Standards paper, which is, I'm sure many of you may have seen there, most recent version published in August. In terms of responsibility for adherence to cross-compliance in Northern Ireland, this is split really across a number of departments and public bodies as follows. There's the DARD Service Delivery Group, the Agri-Food Inspection Branch. They take responsibility for 2 statutory management rules. There's the DARD Service Delivery Group, really I suppose element as well covered by Countryside Inspectorate, and they have 4 of the GAEC standards. DARD Veterinary Service currently covers 8 SMRs. Those are largely relating, as you will imagine, to animal health and welfare. And then the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, which I suppose sits under DOE at present, but obviously the circumstance will change within the newly revised departments, currently has responsibility for 3 SMRs and 3 GAECs. Should also point out that there's an additional SMR, and that's covered really by the Health and Safety Executive for Northern Ireland. But it's the actual management and day-to-day, I suppose, the inspection process relating to that is covered by DARD. And that was really dealing with, I think it's pesticides. I suppose when you look at the actual standards, all of the SMRs and GACs, I think many farmers within Northern Ireland may actually be subject to all of these. I know members had asked me to look at ones which applied simply to BPS. You can see Table 2 and Table 3 within that. I've itemised who applies to all claimants, which for particular types of claimants. But given the nature of agriculture within Northern Ireland, that many individual farmers may be beneficiaries on more than one programme, it's not inconceivable to consider the majority may well be subject to all of the SMRs or GAECs as a result of their farming practice. So with that in mind, I suppose I looked very briefly at the inspection process. And I suppose the cross-compliance regulations at an EU level really require checks to be made on 1% of all beneficiaries in order to establish if the requirements are being adhered to. It should also be noted, and I think it's important to point out, that there are a number of SMRs, namely SMR 7, which deals with cattle ID and registration, and SMR 8, which deals with sheep and goat identification and registration, that the cross-compliance rates there are actually higher. They're set as 3%, largely due to the fact that the cross-compliance element makes up a wider EU reporting requirement in relation to those areas. In terms of more generalities around the 1% requirement, how that's actually broken down, 25% of those recipients of an inspection are identified randomly and 75% on the basis of risk. In terms of the risk selection criteria, those are, from what I've been able to establish, are unique to each of the control authorities and potentially by default unique to each of the individual SMRs and GACs. Conversations I've had with DARD officials, however, has established that they don't publish that data for fairly obvious reasons. But I have been able, I suppose, to get a bit of a flavour, and I have included them in the paper there for some of the criteria that are utilised in relation to SMR 4, SMR 10 and GAECs 4 to 7. And you can see some of the things there. There's a positive weighting, for example, for membership of the Farm Quality Assurance Scheme. There's a negative weighting if you didn't receive a cross-compliance visit or inspection in the previous year. There's a negative weighting if your the applicant's land contains an archaeological feature. It may be also necessary, DARD had said, to target certain areas of Northern Ireland if the inspection results for those areas showed a higher than average level of breaches in the previous year. So there's a range of risk criteria, and that's only some. As I said, I didn't get access to all I asked, but for fairly obvious reasons, I can understand why they were reluctant to share those or to put them in the public domain. I think, bearing that in mind, and so you can read them there in the paper, effectively what the actual managing authority then does, it looks at all of the weightings, they total them for each business, and then they rank those from the riskiest to the least risky. And the riskiest businesses, on the basis of the criteria, are those which are selected for inspection. Farmers who are selected for inspection are then generally given advance notice, and I suppose going back again to EU regulation, this is so long as advance notice does not jeopardise the purpose of the inspection. And there is a slight variation in relation to land-related inspections. The advance notice will generally not exceed 14 days, and it's 48 hours if it's relating to animals. All cross-compliance inspections are carried out by on-the-spot or field checks. There's not any satellite remote sensing element here. And on completing their inspection, the inspector will give the farmer a chance to see and sign their inspection report. If there are no instances of non-compliance, the process ends there. But if there are breaches, DARD writes to the farmer to inform them, provide details on the breach and identify any potential penalty or payment reduction. farmers then can effectively at that point, I should have said actually, farmers could also receive a warning letter without an actual penalty, but any farmers found to be in breach of the requirements can ask for their case to be reviewed as part of DARD's formal review process. Just some very quick observations and possible questions. I think when I read these, and I had looked at them before, but again, when you read them, you are struck by the complexity of the requirements. It comes through very strongly, and that I'm talking about both for farmers trying to adhere to them and inspectors trying to assess compliance. I suppose when I looked at that, that raises that first question. What training do inspectors get, and how is a consistent approach achieved? That's both within an agency or a body and across. Could there be if there are differing interpretations of the same standard? Is that a problem? Is it one that DARD are aware of? Or do DARD, NIEA or the EU benchmark the process of inspection? I think that leads on to the fact of the GACs are the area that might be altered. Does DARD believe the GAEC standards it utilises in Northern Ireland meet the EU's minimal requirement? Or is there room for simplification or reduction in relation to them? I have to say DARD does publish detailed guidance. That is very clear when you read the document. I held it up earlier. But could there be value in producing additional advice for farmers? And I looked at, for example, at the advice in Wales, which is maybe slightly more accessible, and also interestingly included templates, the sort of information that farmers would have to collect if they were subject to inspection. So it might have been maybe, you could have argued, maybe potentially more practically useful to them. This is undoubtedly accurate, but the other may, you could argue, be more accessible. The point, I suppose, as well is that DARD really does submit cross-compliance adherence data to the EU, but we don't know really how we compare. The EU doesn't publish. There are various reports looking at various elements, but there isn't an overarching, here's how Northern Ireland compares. That would be useful, but I suppose it would also be useful to know if DARD is aware of any differences and what the possible reasons are for this. I mean, I know members have raised this a few times and other stakeholders well. Does maybe, for example, if we had a higher non-compliance rate, does that reflect higher non-compliance, or is it tighter or stricter inspection? Another thing I wanted to flag to you is I think there is a question around what opportunities exist for farmers to amend or challenge the findings of an inspection report before they need to proceed to the formal process. Are there any statistics or anecdotal evidence to that effect? Are the risk criteria in terms of inspection benchmarked by DARD and by the EU, and how do they compare to those employed in other jurisdictions? And the final one, I suppose, is that I think in Northern Ireland we have, as I mentioned, quite a number of departments and agencies involved in this process. What effects, if any, will the impending merging of DOE and DARD into a new department have on the cross-compliance process and people's experience of it? And that, I suppose, completes, I realise it was a quick run through, but I'm happy to take any questions before I go on to the second one, which is shorter.
One bulletin we're here to see at second stage independent panel reviews, data for Wales and Northern Ireland, where 40% of cases in Northern Ireland are successfully changed, only 2% in Wales. That may have a two-edged sword. They may tell us that our department's been too stringent and too many, so many has been a change of appeal.
I suppose that I'm going to come on to those in a minute when the second paper, but again, I'm cautious to say that because all of the data wasn't directly comparable. For different time periods and different programmes, there could be a number of contentious cases which could skew it. But yes, I could see how you could. The challenge was ever this: is you're not necessarily comparing like with like.
I understand that,
but I could see how you could. Assertion. Yeah. Whether such an assertion would stand up under robust scrutiny, I'm not so sure, but it's a very obvious.
Yeah. Joe Byrne.
Chairman, I welcome the presentation by Mark. Yes, the whole issue of inspections is a very vexed issue for farmers. You talked about the random selection. I can tell you there's quite a few of them feel that it's, what should I say, controlled randomisation. And they feel some of them that are particularly chosen. They may have had an inspection a year ago and 2 years later they have another one. And there's a sense of unease about it. And in fact there's also a question about inspections in particular geographic areas, places. I know part of my Ulster feels that anyway. Can I ask you, however, in relation to the data that the EU keeps, is this tied into the infractions fines that we have to experience from time to time?
It's a good question, and it's not one I considered in the paper, but I'm happy to look at it. In terms of, I think non-compliance, I suppose, in Northern Ireland is, there's been a range. I suppose the general fixation has been on the land parcel identification system in recent years. But I wouldn't be in a position here today to give you an assessment as to whether cross-compliance forms a significant part, but happy to go away and look at it.
And can I ask you, Mark, what's the most recent infraction fines that we're aware of?
Again, it's not something I'd actually had considered in relation to this, but I'm happy again to look at it, and specifically in relation to cross-compliance. Okay, I'm happy to do that for you.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you again, Mark, for an excellent piece of work, as always. Again, can I just refer you to, I'm concerned that you talk about the advice in Wales and how it's more accessible, and there is an overarching comparative with how Northern Ireland compares. That be to the advantage maybe of the department rather than not. Concerned that it's always good, and you know I usually raise it with you, it's good to have comparisons with other jurisdictions. You know, so I would imagine that would need a change, or what's your feeling about that?
I think, I suppose, as a service, we're always reluctant because, while something at a headline level might appear directly comparable, as I said earlier, there are so many variables that can impact on this. I think at a very basic level, on this element around the inspection and what a farmer can expect, and in providing support. Now, does that mean that a farmer is more likely to be compliant? I don't know. If the advice is more willy, I mean, you may suggest, you could have a hypothesis that very complicated advice makes it harder to comply, or it actually might mean that it's maybe easier, depending on your mindset. But in the context, I suppose, what you're looking at here, I suppose I identified the Welsh model simply for the simple fact that when I'm looking at it for the majority of farmers, it may be an easier document to access. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that one, Joanne.
Yep.
The information that I couldn't fault, and even examples in terms of the GACs in terms of guidance. But the Welsh one, I said, when you compare, does appear to be maybe more farmer friendly, is maybe the term I would use. It could be argued.
It's far easier to read.
But the question does then arise, does that mean compliance is going to be higher? And you know, you can't necessarily, I suppose, say that, because there could be factors such as how inspections are conducted. We don't have sufficient data to be able to establish what the biggest variable or factor is in terms of compliance rates.
That's disappointing too, isn't it? Because it's important to have, I
It's,
know you're saying it's difficult to have a comparative, but
Yep.
for benchmarking as well. And
well, I suppose that's the reason I raised the point, I suppose, within the paper, even in relation to benchmarking of this, both within Northern Ireland and across the UK, or even at an EU level. And I suppose that's where it really does make that more pertinent, particularly in relation to the inspection process, because you would want to ensure, and I think it's in, I suppose, everyone's interest, that inspections are being applied in an equal way across all jurisdictions. And that's why I suppose I do ask what knowledge DART have as that, has it contributed? Is it aware of differences? And if there are differences in terms of Northern Ireland's performance to other regions, what reasons has either DART been given, or what reasons does DART believe that's shaping that or leading to that situation?
yeah, I know you spoke of the 48 hours relating to an on-site inspection. It goes in the clear interest of husband's a beef farmer.
Yes.
And I know, you know, it does seem that fear, even of the inspection as well, it does seem quite a heavy-handed approach. It's the same, I take it, in all jurisdictions.
It is. That's not. It's affixed in the regulation, and I suppose it is that issue again, as long as it doesn't prejudice the outcome of the purpose of the inspection. So
Thanks, Mark.
it's across the board.
Thank you.
Okay. You know, I'm fully aware that I think the 48 hours is and I think it's an EU requirement, because in around the cattle identification, all the freedom, you know,
Correct.
you have no time for farmers to make changes if we had to, you know, so that's probably in around, they have to be fairly firm on that.
Absolutely.
But sometimes what actually is happening, I've seen it happening, they give you notification on a Friday evening for Monday morning.
You do, yeah, over the weekend.
But it's over a weekend, and you know, the 48 hours doesn't have to be
No.
48 working hours.
No.
And that can be quite difficult.
That's a good point, and the statute doesn't specify in that regard either. It's effectively just 48 hours.
I happen to be personal. I declare it to being a farmer, but I happen to be out of the country one day, and I got a phone call on a Friday night from an inspector, and he said, "I'm inspecting you 9 o'clock on Monday morning." Well, I said, "I'm in Spain," and it just shows you. I wasn't even aware. I got a phone call.
Yeah.
Did you get my letter today? And we hadn't got the letter because I was out of the country, but. So, I mean, You certainly don't get much time.
No, that's
For an
supposed to be the nature of inspection. That's the way you have to do it, I
Well,
suppose.
but that's very difficult for a large herd because he needs to make sure his manpower there, you know.
Correct.
You know, it is not, it's not easy.
And your ordinary farming activity continues as well.
That's right. You take a Monday morning, it's usually the busiest morning of the week after the weekend, and it's very, very
No,
difficult.
I fully appreciate that.
Yep. Any other members? Mark, thank you very much.
Okay, Chair, well, I'll move on very quickly to the second one. I suppose that's really just, the comparison of the CAP review of decisions or appeals procedures. That's in your actual pack on your online one, which is pages 91 to 106. What I basically looked at is compared and contrasted the different appeal or review of decision processes across the UK and down south. I suppose it needs to be said that the expansion and proliferation really of CAP supports has really, I suppose, really presented more opportunity for challenges for potential beneficiaries. It's also probably led to more mistakes. So these processes, I suppose, have become ever more prominent over recent years and decades. It also has to be said, I suppose, when you actually look at the data, and I've done this in two tables, so I'm going to give you very much a run through very quickly here. Tables 1 and 2 really are what I'm going to be referring to here. Table 1 is pages 96 to 102 on your screens. And first thing I want to draw attention to is the system features. I think when I looked at all of the systems, the review of decisions procedure appears to be more limited in terms of application in Northern Ireland when compared to the rest of the UK and down south. It's largely only utilised here for area-based schemes, whereas across the water, in particular, it applied to really nearly any application. Meaning a lot of the real development measures in terms of the social side were included in England. Also, it needs to be said that in relation to conditions for seeking an appeal or review, the 42-day limit from the date of the decision letter in Northern Ireland is different. It's less than that being used in all of the other jurisdictions. It's a 60-day limit in England, Scotland and Wales and a 3-month limit within the Republic of Ireland, so ours is shorter. The other thing I want to say on that is the two-stage appeal system we have, very similar to the one employed in both England and Wales, but does differ from Scotland and down south. Scotland, I suppose you have the Scottish Land Court effectively as the second stage. And down south, effectively any appeals effectively at that point go to the Agricultural Appeals Office, which is a separate body. Sits outside of government. All of the appeals and review mechanisms did include provisions for an oral hearing, so there's commonality in that. In terms of independent panels, which many of these processes draw upon, and training for those, the available data suggests that we're actually ahead of other jurisdictions in the support that we provide to panel members in terms of induction and ongoing training. But we're also unique in the sense that whilst the time that an independent panel sits, basically it's appointed, everyone on the same day, and the time expires and everybody leaves on the same day. If you look at other jurisdictions, for example the Welsh system, there'll always be a third of panel members there are new. So there's always people who have been there, have experience. It's not that all of their memberships expire on the same day. That's an interesting comparator. We also, I suppose, appear to be unique in not actually having a fixed target or service standard for the completion of reviews or appeals. All of the other jurisdictions have that. In terms of fees for conducting an appeal or review, our fees in Northern Ireland are identical to those used within Wales. It's £100 for a Stage 2 oral review and £50 for a Stage 2 written. But they're cheaper. Our fees are cheaper than those used in England and Scotland, particularly if you include the Land Court in Scotland. Down south, I suppose, really stands unique in the sense that there is no fee. There's no fee charged. And given the volume of cases that came forward in 2013 down south, there could be a suggestion, but I can't substantiate this, that there has the lack of fee maybe encourage people to appeal or seek a review. In relation to who makes the final decision, within Northern Ireland, that responsibility lies with the head of payments, effectively the head of finance within DARD, whereas in England and Wales it's made by the Minister and the Scottish Land Court in Scotland, and within the Republic of Ireland it's made by either an appeals officer or the director within the appeals office. Within this context, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland really, I suppose, really stand apart in leaving the final decision to civil servants, particularly when you look at GB. There is consistency across all the jurisdictions when it comes to other means of challenge, predominantly judicial review or the option of ombudsman, and that was present in all of the jurisdictions. In terms of, very quickly, in terms of performance, That's set out really in Table 2, pages 103 to 106. There are a number of things that stand out there. As I made the point earlier to Joanne and to Joe, it is difficult to compare the performance of the reviews appeals mechanisms. And that's largely due to the fact that the available data covers different time frames and stages. And I suppose while I say do treat it with caution, there does appear to be some difference, really, I suppose, between ourselves and Wales. And that 40% of our cases are successfully changed, either in part or full, whereas there's only 2% changed in Wales. Looking, I suppose, in terms across at the Independent Agricultural Appeals Panel in England, that's probably actually closer to our situation in Northern Ireland. It's 35% of appeals in England being upheld or partially upheld in 2014-15. When you look at Stage 2 reviews in Scotland and down south, I suppose really the reliance in Scotland, the Land Court and Agricultural Appeals Office, there are very big differences. I mean, if you look in Scotland, only 10 cases actually made it to the Scottish Land Court. And actually, you make the point in the paper, they're actually looking at this process in relation to is it working, because that's a very small number of cases proceeding, and I think cost is a major bearing there. Whereas if you look at down south, 44% of 468 cases heard by the Appeals Office were either allowed, partially allowed or revised by the Department. So 44% down south. In terms of Stage 1 appeals in Scotland and Wales, similar levels of success, maybe not dwell too much more on that. Average time being taken, DARD was the only body willing to provide any data on this. Particularly the GB bodies I talked to were very reluctant to provide anything for their Stage 2 processes. And I have to say, it was interesting in that conversation. When you even look at the data we do have, it does seem that maybe it does take longer to resolve in Northern Ireland, but I'd be very cautious about saying that, because as I think the point was made in GB and the reason they refused to share stats is the fact that you could very easily have one or two very difficult cases which will skew the length of time taken on average. So I suppose I would be cautious in using that. Very quickly then, in terms of potential issues, I think there does have to be a question as to why DARD doesn't use a fixed target or service standard for the processing. Whilst other jurisdictions undoubtedly maybe go beyond that in individual cases, why don't we have one here? I think that's one of the questions I had. I think it would also be useful to clarify why Northern Ireland appears to be using a shorter period of time from receipt of initial decision in which an appeal review can be lodged. That's at 42 days I mentioned, when compared to the other jurisdictions. There may well be good reasons for that, but the information I saw, I was unable to determine any from what was in the public domain. I think Northern Ireland does compare well in terms of other jurisdictions in terms of support and training to independent panel members, as I said. But I think there might be merit in looking at this idea, similar to the Welsh have, that you retain a third, you've only ever a third of your members of your panel are new, that you retain experience to deal with cases. I think the question does have to be looked when we look at down south. Has DARD considered the idea of maybe not utilising a fee in relation to appeals or right of review? Would that have a substantial impact in the numbers of appeals reviews? Would that be counterproductive in terms of time taken to process those? And I think we also have to be honest and say, what are the reasons for appeals reviews potentially taking longer to process in Northern Ireland? What factors are at play here? Is it the complex cases are protracting the process, or is there a lack of resources within DARD to expedite reviews or appeals? And I suppose that's, at this point, probably all that I want to say on those, but I'm happy to take any questions very quickly.
Mark, thank you very much again for a very good report. In relation to second stage appeals, you did say that other jurisdictions were looking to give you any time frame. What was the time frame that Northern Ireland actually did?
The time frame, Chair, just give me 1 minute. If you look at the...
Because I know that some of these taking a very, very long time, I'm told.
Yes, if you look at Table 2, Chair, average time to process an appeal, Stage 2 review in Northern Ireland is 576 calendar days.
Yeah.
And as I said, none of the other jurisdictions were prepared to give me any data. I thought I was going to get data from Wales, but when they began to look at it, they said, look, we're not going to do that for some reason.
Maybe it's quite bad too.
Well, I think particularly the Welsh officials I spoke to did raise the point that they'd had a number of complex cases over the last year and a half, which in their opinion skewed those figures to such an extent that it actually took away the value of the data. And I suppose, and that was reflected their reluctance.
I'm aware of people that had to wait up to 2 years or almost.
Yeah.
That's
So I mean, there will be, and even within DARDs, I mean, I haven't got a breakdown. There may well, as I said, the reasons and the rationale for the impact here. There could be a small number of cases could be impacting upon that figure as well.
Yeah.
Having a disproportionate impact on the average time taken.
But it is very long, and one would have thought.
Yeah.
If you wait,
Again, I suppose I'm reluctant to make a comparison. It's the only one I had data for. But when you look at it, yes, as a pure number, 576 days is a substantial period of time.
the one issue that you mentioned, we had an issue whereby when the second stage panel made a decision, the department didn't always honour that decision.
Yes.
And that was down to the civil servant makes the call. But in essence, we had felt was unfair. Why have a second stage? Why have a panel, an independent panel that makes a decision and then it's overruled? You know.
Yeah. No, that's
That same situation happens across all jurisdictions.
can effectively the minister, as I mentioned, particularly in GB. I mean, down south, it can be the appeals officer, the chief officer. I think I made the point can effectively overrule potentially an appeals officer. But yes, across the water, yes, the panel may make a recommendation, but the minister may refuse to reject said decision by a panel.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
But I mean, in normal procedure that I'm aware with all the independent processes, normally independent panel is fine.
Well, I suppose the key is it's a tribunal. It's not a tribunal. It's not binding in that context.
That's right.
So it's advice, and officials can choose to act on the advice, or the minister can choose to ignore it, as advised by officials.
But that can be very painful for farmers because they've paid a fee, they go through the process and they believe they've won their process, and then all of a sudden they find out.
And then the carpet can be pulled out from
under. Declan?
Thanks. The 576 days does seem to be incredible. Indeed, both myself and Oliver have spoken to the minister about that there figure. It seems startling, but just don't know whether this is possible to get this information or not, but bear in mind that I guess that's a meaning, and that can be skewed by
It is.
incredible cases, but difficult cases. But do you think it's possible, or is it available to try and get the mode or the median to try and give a sense of you know?
I think that, I make the point.
Average farmer, you know.
I think there would be value in that. I think there would be also value in actually, and I suppose the data that I had access to in Dard, where I have to be upfront, Dard were very good in providing even that. I think at that point the task of actually being able to go beyond that within the time frame that the papers to complete it would be difficult. But yes, I agree with you. I think to have more data on that and even find out what appeals, what potential areas are these relating to. Because again, talking to the other jurisdictions, as you correctly said, like an average figure, you maybe do not need that many cases to actually skew this significantly if it's a very protracted case.
I think it actually would be in Dard's interest to provide that there, because
Absolutely.
that there is a figure which can leave them open to criticism.
No, and I made that point within the paper. I think it's Dard's gift, I suppose, to provide that additional information, and I think I do, however, suspect it'll be a similar situation to that mentioned in Wales. There could well be a number of cases who have had a disproportionate impact on the time taken. So the actual figure, if you took those out, for example, might be radically different. Because that was something actually the guy I spoke to in Wales had offered at one point to say, well, I could send you data that will take out problem cases, but then it's not an actually directly comparable figure because Dard weren't able to provide that for me at that point.
Yeah.
So it could be an option.
Any other members? No. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Move on to agenda item 9, oral briefing from Dard, update on 2015 single applications, including inspections. Can I refer members to the members of the clerk at pages 108 to 111, and papers from the department at pages 112 to 113. I think they're on their way. Okay, can I welcome Pauline Rooney, Acting Director of EU Area Based Schemes Division, Jason Foy, Acting Head of Area Based Scheme Development Unit, Richard Crowe, Head of Countryside Management. You're very welcome. And can I ask you to take up to 10 minutes to give your presentation and we ask some questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
We were last here at the start of September and outlined the progress of the work on the new direct payments at that stage. And since then, we have been working hard to progress claims, including those subject to inspections, in order to meet the conditions that allow us to make payments to farmers as much as possible in December. I provided you with a written update which advises you on the position with respect to the key areas of work, and I don't intend to go over most of those now. We're very conscious of the importance of these payments to farming families, particularly during this period of difficult market conditions for all sectors. Last month, the Minister announced a very challenging target for payment performance. This was that 95% of eligible applicants would be paid in December. And with respect to inspections, she committed to make payments to the majority of these in December, with all being paid by the end of March. The Minister announced today we've started to make payments. Around 80% of eligible farmers' payments were made today, and these payments should be in bank accounts by the end of this week. This is of a value of about £154 million. From today, we will continue to make payments on finalised claims on a daily basis. The farmers paid today included around 300 who were subject to an inspection. This is a good start towards the achievement of the payments performance target. We are committed to progressing as many cases as possible through to payment in December and beyond, and will seek to resolve outstanding queries and applications as quickly as practical. I want to make a few key points around the Young Farmers Payment and Regional Reserve and the active farmer assessments. The Young Farmer Regional Reserve cases have all been assessed and either accepted, rejected, asked for clarification of the evidence provided, or identified for technical consideration. So far, the eligibility rate is around 80%, although that could change when we go through the remaining 9 cases. Technical assessment can include consideration by a panel of senior agricultural inspectors, and/or an inspection, and/or an interview. Where outstanding decisions relate to a regional reserve case requesting a top-up to the value of their entitlements, we will progress payments to the farmers on the basis of the provisional value of their entitlements and will review as relevant when a decision is made. There was a concern raised at an earlier committee meeting that applications to the Young Farmers Payment or Regional Reserve which were not supported by a statement from an independent qualified accountant were being rejected. We've reviewed this position and are content that if the original accounting statements are verified by an independent qualified accountant, it will provide us with the assurance we need. And we have written to affected applicants and advised them of this. With respect to the active farmer assessment, we're due to complete initial assessment of all cases this week. Cases are either being accepted, rejected, asked to provide further evidence, or identified for technical assessment. A large majority of the cases fall into the third category, which is further information has been requested. In these cases, the evidence provided by the applicant has been insufficient for the department to determine whether or not the applicant is actively farming the land they claimed. Therefore, it's not yet certain that they are eligible to receive direct payments. There are a considerable number of applications that we are not in a position to progress because we're waiting on information from applicants. This includes the active farmer cases referred to before, where we have asked for further evidence, a few Young Farmer Regional Reserve cases where we're seeking clarification of the evidence they've provided, farmers who have not yet replied to the Associated Herds letter we sent them in August, and farm businesses which have not provided us with their BACS details, their banking details. Until we get further information from these applicants, we are not able to progress their claims. Entitlement values for 2015 need to be reported to the EU Commission by the 1st of April. To allow time to progress remaining applications, we've asked for all outstanding information on the active farmer and Young Farmer Regional Reserve applications to be provided as soon as possible and no later than the 29th of January 2016. Delays in establishing entitlement values will create problems for anyone either trying to claim for the schemes in 2016 or to trade entitlements in 2016. So that's all I wish to say at present, Mr. Chair. I thank you for your attention and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I suppose we welcome the fact that 80% you say is payments going out today or this week. I'm aware that there seems to be a hold up in some countryside management payments. Is that the situation or what way is on with those?
Well, we're processing payments right across all the schemes at the minute. And yes, we have put, because there's new schemes this year, they have, we have put new mechanisms in place to pay schemes. But I don't, we are continuing to pay. I think countryside management schemes kind of come up all through the year, particularly the legacy schemes, and I think there's about an 11-week window in which we can pay. And I haven't heard that we have fallen outside of that window yet. Richard, would you want to say something?
Yeah,
I only hear the ones that hasn't got the money. You understand? So
our commitment is to pay those within 12 weeks of the receipt of the application or the claim, and we're currently online to do that. As Pauline has indicated, there is a new payments processing system which we have inputted for across all of the schemes. But we are continuing to make payments for countryside management, and we're keeping those at a high priority as well amongst all of the other priorities that we're dealing with.
And one constituent was told a number of weeks ago that he wouldn't be paid to basic payments were in the main paid out because. But I've been assured since that that's not the case.
No, we definitely made agri-environment payments last week, and so they're continuing.
Okay. In relation to the active farmer test, and I know those, you said they were almost there, and those, well, and those that did give you further information.
Yes.
Is what you're saying is you receive further information, but you need more information on some, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you do. I think the vast majority probably that fall into that category, when we look at what they're doing, I think a lot of them are involved in grass silage production and have gone into that this year. And we need evidence that they have a business there. So we need more information from them to identify that they have a farm.
It mightn't be very profitable, but no matter, it's a business, I would have thought, but it mightn't be very profitable this year. Yeah. No, but I think a lot of those people are, I know at one particular guy, and he has actually spent a lot of money becoming active, and he's very keen to get a single farm payment because it has actually cost him a lot of money to become active, and he's one of those.
Yeah, we have tried, I mean, on the basis of the information that we've provided, we have carried out a thorough assessment, and we are seeking to see, does this stack up to be an active farmer? If it isn't, we are asking for more information so that can be demonstrated. It's just in a case of quite a lot of them, we do need more information to get to that point.
Okay. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your briefing. I note in your briefing, Pauline, you said that you're conscious of the importance of these payments. I think that's an understatement. They're a lifeline for many farmers at the minute, so they're very, very much needed. Suppose I need to declare an interest. My husband receives a single farm payment. I refer to, in the briefing, you refer to the significant number of duplicate fields have been detected this year, and I note the only answer seems to be you are considering action to help reduce the level in future years. Have you been asleep at the wheel here? How this has been discussed time and time again, and we've raised concerns, and others have raised many concerns, and your answer seems to be fix it for the future.
Well, duplicate field claims are part of an they're identified through an administrative control that we apply, and there's very limited flexibility in how that control can be applied within the regulation. There are only two provisions that you can, once you find a duplicate field, that you could consider might apply, and if they don't, well then it has to be treated as an over-declaration, and those are obvious error and farmer not at fault. And even in those, it's very prescriptive about how they can be applied. So we apply the regulation as fairly as we can. But the thing is that there has been duplication of land on at least two claims, and that's why you have a duplicate claim.
I hear every year, I seem to be having the same conversation time and time again, and I would like to maybe know a bit more as what you've done to try to avoid the situation this year, knowing that this is going to arise. It seems to arise every single year. What went wrong, and essentially what steps are you taking to amend application and future improvement for years?
Well, guidance is very clear that you should claim what you are using. I think it was quite clear this year. And certainly in all the briefings or events that we would have done and talked to farmers, we would have emphasised that point. I think there is something that we can do, but certainly it is for the future. We are, as I said the last time that we were here and we covered this issue in detail, we are looking to see if there is anything that we can build into our online application form that can potentially help people to flag up that they are claiming a field that somebody else has. I think there are limitations to that because that will only apply to people who use the online form, and there's still a considerable number of people here who don't. Europe is seeking to bring in a simplification element to its rules this year, which would be about introducing a preliminary check, and that's which would allow us to advise people of issues that we can identify at an immediate point in their claim, and that probably would include duplicate claims. But there are actually conditions around that which we have to get the Commission to clarify as to how we can do that.
I do note to say that you're considering actions. Mm-hmm. What actions are you considering then?
Well, we are considering if we can have triggers in the online form so that when people fill out the online application form, that would advise them if they had claimed a field that has already been claimed by somebody else. But the limitations to that are purely around the number of people who use the online application form. Now, we're very lucky. We got to just nearly 50% this year, but that means that there are 50% of farmers that didn't use that form, and a paper form cannot do that for people. So it would be a great incentive for people to go and start to use the online form, because if we put this trigger in, that would alert people to just make sure you've got the right field there.
You told us that the 14,204 duplicate field errors impacted 3,324 businesses this year. So can you confirm whether these have delayed the payments for those businesses?
Do you want to maybe take that one?
At the moment, we have reduced the volume from just over 14,000 to 500 field errors.
Currently?
Yes, as of this morning. So we have reduced the overall volume by 96%, and what we are left with in that 500 are two categories of circumstances. One where there is court action between the two claiming businesses, and the other where both businesses are maintaining to the department that they are both actively farming that field and providing evidence to us that they in support of that assertion, and we are now looking at assessing that evidence to see if we can make a determination.
Does that potentially mean then, Jason, with regards to actively farming the fields, does that potentially mean a clawback if they haven't?
Well, we wouldn't make a payment to either party until we had determined who was the correct claimant on that field. I think that will affect, of the 500 duplicate field errors that we have, that would affect 149 businesses.
And a final point, you say in your briefing that you've been in contact with the Republic of Ireland. Are they experiencing the same level of duplicate fields that we have here?
I think we were in contact with them about how they applied, and also with all the other regions in the UK about how they applied the duplicate, how they applied the cross controls.
Do we have a comparative then of their levels?
We didn't ask them how many they had, but they do apply all the rules in the same way as we do, because they have to and we have to.
It would just be useful even to find out.
Yeah.
That could be provided then. Sure, it would be.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think if something could be done, if you could get almost or near enough 100% of farmers online and something in the system, it would be brilliant. It would probably, other than, of course, you do tell us that there's a few people challenging each other. Those people are still going to be a problem because they are both claiming the ground and they're going to go to court to do that. Or it looks like. So there will be always a few cases no matter what you do, I suppose, but it could rule out the vast majority of those, maybe they do it unintentionally.
Yeah, no, I think the simplification that the Commission is considering certainly would help a lot in this regard and would be very helpful. We need to understand the conditions that they're going to allow us to use it under.
Yeah.
And at the minute, we think they are around the use of the new online application form. So if we have a lot of farmers who haven't moved to using that online application form, that could limit our ability to do it, or mean we have to try and do things in a different way so we can get other people's information on. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at. So it definitely will work in this area. It'll be good. And there's nothing we would want more, believe me, than to be able to help resolve this. But we have to work within whatever the regulations allow us to do. So we have to find out more about that and see where it takes us.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt the number of people that is now filling in their forms online has increased
It has
dramatically.
increased.
So hopefully that can continue.
It has. And hopefully it will, yes. Yeah, we've got it.
And if there's an encouragement in there somewhere to help it continue,
It should hopefully incentivise it, yeah.
Edwin, please.
Yeah, just on it, you say you're looking at on the online forms not being able to submit the same field twice. I think it's beyond the stage of looking at. I think it needs to be. We need to get assurances from yourselves that is going to be implemented over the course of the next number of months, so we're not in the same situation. Like we went up from 5,000 to 6,000 in the last year in terms of duplicate fields. In 2014,
yeah,
6,000. The previous year there was 5,000. That's not really acceptable, sure it isn't.
I think the level of what would be seen as true duplicates in fields hasn't really changed over the last 3 years. But I accept the point that Joanne is making. That means that there is that level of error in each year, and it is something that if we can do something about, we can. We're developing our system for next year at the minute, and that's certainly something we want to build into it. So.
I don't think there's enough about it. I think it is something that you can do something about, and that's what I'm making very clear. I think the entire committee would like to see the department being more proactive in this and ensuring that we can reduce the numbers of duplicate fields coming in. There generally is only one party in the wrong in these instances. So 2 people suffer because of one person's misdemeanours, and that's not right. It's grossly unfair on the individual who suffers as a consequence. The payments to dairy farmers, was there any particular reason why you didn't send all of the details to England for that money to be distributed? Because we're getting some dairy farmers who have got their payments, then their neighbours haven't, and they seem to be under the impression that not all of their names were forwarded at the one time. And consequently, England only paid out what they got information on because TAR didn't send them the full information.
Maybe you want to talk to that one, Jason?
I can assure you that's absolutely not the case.
Right.
The payment is administered by the Rural Payments Agency on behalf of all of the 4 UK devolved administrations. The RPA maintain to some degree data on dairy production, and this payment is based on dairy production in 2014-15. As RPA are making these payments on our behalf and for England, Scotland and Wales, RPA initially are relying on information, bank account information that they hold, and that information is a number of years old. It dates from around 2009, 2010. RPA have identified at the outset who the eligible payees are, and that includes obviously dairy farmers in Northern Ireland. The exercise that we undertook with RPA, and there were parallel exercises undertaken in Scotland and Wales, was to identify for all of the cases whether the bank account details that RPA hold match those that DART hold. If we have different or more up-to-date bank account details, we provide those to RPA. That has been done. it has also been done in Scotland and Wales. What RPA have decided to do in that set of circumstances is where the bank account details that they hold and that DART hold match, that business was paid on the 16th of November. That would be the case in Scotland and Wales. For the farmers where we hold more up-to-date bank account details for, and the same would apply in Scotland and Wales, a further payment run will be made in the middle of December after RPA have updated all of that data.
Okay.
RPA are trying to balance making the dairy payment with making their own BPS payments too. So we have to, across the UK, we do have to try and balance the priorities for all of these payments at what is a very busy time.
So there's been no holdback on yourselves providing RPA the relevant information?
Absolutely not.
That's not the case?
That is not the case.
Okay. And the reasons is, as you outlined, there has been a change in the bank details of that particular farm business?
Yes.
So there's a difference between what you hold and RPA hold? That's the only
That's
instance?
right. That is correct.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Pauline, I welcome the Department's moves in regard to the accounts and the clarification for that. That was helpful. In regard to the young farmers' payments, a couple of specifics. The qualification of an instance where an applicant actually had completed this course in the time frame, but because the course, which is a coffee rum course, wasn't validated by the UU until 3 weeks later, the department saying he's not eligible. Is there any way around that, despite CAFRE having written a letter saying that he had passed all courses and modules?
I know that they had to have the qualification by the 15th of May. I'm not aware that that is a problem, and I'm sure if it's a problem for one, it would be a problem for quite a number. So I'm not aware that that is an issue, you know, that needs to be clarified. But it's something certainly that I can look into, Robin. I mean,
Right.
it's not.
It's not insurmountable, that's the other.
I don't know what the position on it is, and that's why, you know, I mean, I'll certainly come back to you.
I
on
just
it.
thought it was, you know, the applicant actually had a letter from CAFRE saying
Yeah.
that this fella has passed all the courses,
Yes.
but because his qualification certificate was dated the 29th of June,
Yeah.
he was being rejected.
It seems strange to me, but
So it
certainly
seems strange to the applicant.
I'll look into it and come back to
The
you.
other one in regard to young farmers as well was in regard to partnership agreements, where I've actually had another applicant who had a partnership agreement which showed him having 51% of the business and his father retaining 49%, but there was a sub-clause that either partner could break the agreement, as would be understandable in law at any stage. But he was deemed ineligible again because that contract showed that he wasn't in complete control of the business, even though it would be common in contractual law for that sort of agreement to be underwritten. Is that just the department going too far, or?
I don't think that it is. I mean, I think the regulation says that the young farmer needs to have effective and long-term control of the business. So if it could be dissolved by the minor partner, that doesn't suggest, you know, if at their
But
choice,
any
it doesn't
partnership can be
suggest.
dissolved by a minor partner. The minor partner can walk away at any time.
But if the business can be dissolved because the minor partner chooses to do that, that doesn't suggest that the senior partner has long-term and effective control.
But they will have control of the business on a day-to-day basis as the major.
Yeah, but they need to have it not just on a
Is
day-to-day,
there
it's
legal?
long-term.
Did the department take legal guidance on that, or is that?
I know we have taken legal guidance on a range of things around the young farmer. I couldn't say for certain that we did on that particular aspect.
Right, could I ask then? Well, I can forward the two
Yeah, no, certainly.
concerns to you in writing, Paul. The other one then as well, if I remember in the monitoring round, there's a £2 million bid for, is it computer mapping?
I think there was, yes, there was an IT bid in, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
How would that clarify the issue we were talking about earlier in regard to duplication of fields and mapping it?
Well, now it's not my bids because it's come from the DSD side, but I think it's for support of all of the kind of the IT systems that support everything that we do. So we would use IT to support applications, processing, inspections, mapping. You know, it covers the whole thing. And I think that bid related to, you know, work across the whole gamut of the IT requirements that they had.
So with duplicate fields and inspection being a problem that falls or causes quite a lot of your concern, you know input into that bid?
I don't think it would have had anything to do with our ability to identify duplicate fields, because I think the system that does that is effective.
My question is, if it's a solution to your problem, why aren't you part of the solution?
Can I get your...
No, I don't think it. I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think it's from a how it would work is we identify what business requirements we have, and the IT people will translate those into what they need to do in terms of IT, and that's what they'll base their needs on, and they'll base their bids on those needs that they've identified. So that's, you know, it maybe doesn't work in the way that you think it might.
Right, okay. Geospatial development.
Yes, geospatial application aid, yes. That's essentially, we've had an online SAF up to now, which is a form that goes, you have to go.
We haven't.
Do you want me to answer that in your
I think
absence?
it's covered. Got the question covered? No. Yes.
Not really, no.
Do you want them back when you come back?
No, it's all right. I don't think it's
I
going
get
to.
it in writing?
Aye, that's
In writing. Listen, okay, Pauline, Richard and Jason, thank you very much. Sorry for we have a division.
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.
Agenda item 10, oral briefing from DARD and the fishing industry. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 115 to 120 and papers from the department at pages 121 to 126. Can I also ask members to note that papers in the table pack when DARD sent the original papers to the committee, the EU Commission had not finalised its position on quotas for prawns and haddock. However, this happened on Thursday, 26th November, and as a result, DARD has sent us revised papers. You will see from the table papers that the proposal for prawns is a net reduction of around 70% and 50% for haddock. Can I welcome Ian Humes, Head of Sea Fisheries Policy and Grants Branch, Paddy Campbell, Deputy Principal Sea Fisheries Policy and Grants Branch, and I hope I can pronounce this right. Hi, John Sohan. Principal, sorry for that. Principal Scientific Officer, Agriculture Food Bioscience Institute. And maybe you can introduce yourself, your name there properly.
This is Peter Jan Shane.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that, about that, okay?
No problem.
Can I ask you to take up the 10 minutes for your presentation? And we'll then ask some questions. Thank you very much, and you're very welcome. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's really a familiar story for us coming here at this time of year. We have proposals now for the Commission. As always, we're interested in prawns in the Irish Sea, which is our principal fishery and the most important for the fishing fleet fishing out of County Down. This year, there has been a slight downturn in the scientific advice. It's about 2% lower than last year. And there are further added complications this year in the fisheries negotiations because of what's known as the landing obligation. I'm not sure if members are familiar with that. It's a brand new obligation that demersal fisheries are now having to comply with. It means that from the 1st of January next year, all fish of a certain species will have to be landed if caught. The two species that are affected by that in the Irish Sea that our fleet target are prawns, ephrops and haddock. So as well, because you're having to land fish that used to be pitched over the side for a variety of reasons, one of the things that needs to happen is that the quotas have to be uplifted to allow for that fish to be landed. So there are two aspects to these negotiations. One is the routine assessment of fishing opportunities, and the second one is the uplift that you will get for the obligation to land fish. Now, we've been to the committee here and I've explained this situation before. The issue with the Irish Sea and the issue with the Area 7 NEFROPS is that when you add up all of the various bits of scientific advice for the 7 different prawn grounds that are in the wider area, it comes to this year 17,719 tonnes, whereas last year it was 18,118 tonnes. So we're down 2%, and there's some reasons for that, which my colleague Peter Yan can explain if you wish. But with just a 2% movement, this varies year on year. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down, but it's always remaining round about the same thing. But the TAC is much, much higher than the sum of this science, and the reason for that is because not everybody takes their share of the quota. So if you can imagine, or just put simple numbers on this, that if you had 100 tonnes of fish to catch, you had 4 member states interested in it, each had a quarter to take, and one decided not to, or not decided, but because of the fishery has changed for them over the years, that they wouldn't take their share, well then what you could safely take from the fishery would be underfished. So what happens is that the Commission then set the bar that bit higher, or have done in the past, so that those that fish it are able to take more. However, we go through this dance with the Commission every year, where they actually start off with a proposal which is equal to the science, and then through a process of negotiation we usually end up with having a figure that is higher than the science, but the landings, what was taken from that, is roughly the same as the science. So I'd say there is an added complication. We have to get that point through. The Commission have made a recommendation. They have followed the usual pattern. They have recommended a number that is based on the science. We will have those discussions and those negotiations with them, and we'll be saying to them that the starting point ought to be where we were last year, minus 2%. And our industry is content with that the fishing opportunities would change year on year in line with the science. And as I say, one year is down 2%, next year is up 3% or whatever. It remains broadly the same. So that's where we are, and we've had discussions, my minister's had discussions with the fishing industry, and they've confirmed that the priorities for the negotiations are to maintain the catching opportunities for NEFROPS, and also to increase the catching opportunities for haddock. And that's another difficult story, because again, if you look at the scientific advice for that, it is much, much lower than the TAC, and there are more complex reasons for that, but it's to do with the way in which the assessment is done, and how and the policy framework that the Commission adopts, which is not really appropriate to a stock of this nature, which can be subject to quite wide fluctuations. So the scientific advice is actually saying that we can increase our catch opportunities by about 20%, but the Commission immediately comes forward with a different number. And again, this is also affected by uplift, but we don't think it's going to be too much in the case of haddock, because most of the haddock that has been taken in the Irish Sea has been taken by whitefish vessels that actually target it. It's not taken as a bycatch of the prawn fishery, and they will target haddock, and it's a very, very clean fishery, and they throw very little back over the side. So any uplift, since they're the only ones that are obliged to land haddock, any uplift is likely to be small. You know, there are other changes in fishing opportunities. We see the customary reduction in the cod TAC because of the existence of the cod plan, and we see other stocks which are poorly. In sole, for example, where the scientific advice is there should be no directed fishery, that's not going to affect us. We don't target sole. Anybody that does so is usually Belgian in the Irish Sea. And if you look at, I think, some of the supplementary tables that Paddy had provided in terms of the value of the fish, we only have about 3 tonnes there. It's not a very valuable fish. The main thing that we have, and our main earner, is prawns and haddock, and of course herring, which is the herring. We have about 2/3 of a share of around 5,000 tonnes, and the other third is swapped in with the south, and they will swap things like anglerfish and other species that they don't target to obtain more herring, so that they take all of the TAC and the REC. The only other thing that I would say in closing, Chair, is that we thought that this whole negotiation was going to be a wee bit further complicated, because a few years ago, 2012, the Council took a decision that it would freeze the cuts on the number of days at sea that were being imposed by the cod plan. Now that decision, and that went into a regulation, that decision was challenged by the European Parliament and the Commission, and it went through the European Court of Justice. The Council, representing Member States, lost that case, but the effect of what they did, what the Court said quite helpfully, was that the effect of what the Council did was to remain in place for a full year, and that was something that the Commission said. So there will be no change this Christmas, and we will not have to waste time arguing over cuts and effort and other things. We have enough of a complication this year with the landing obligation and trying to work out how much quotas should change to take account of that. That's
okay, and thank you very much for your presentation. In relation to haddock, for instance, and the announcement of a 50% cut, was that a shock to you, or was this just Europe again setting out their stall?
I don't think. I think we're disappointed in it. You know, this is something that they have done, and then surprisingly this year, was it last year they started off from a higher position?
Last year they started off at a higher position.
They've been completely and totally focused on this uplift for the landing obligation, that they have forgotten other issues. And I mean, we think that there's a really, really strong argument here for certainly an increase in the TAC, just on the basis of the science and the information that's coming through. Very, very good recruitment 2013, a lot of fish in the fishery at the moment. And if the TAC is not uplifted, well, then it's actually contrary to the Common Fisheries Policy, because what you will then do is increase discarding of fish. You'll have more fish that are maybe caught by nephrops, trawlers and other things, and there won't be the quota, to enable them to land them, but at the same time they're not caught by the landing obligation. Look, I think that we will have a different situation. I hope we will have a different situation. I think we will certainly give you a note about process. Next week, Paddy will be going to Brussels in what's known as a technical meeting with the Commission and the Presidency. At that point, we're able to press with facts and figures and say, look, why we think you've got it wrong. And then, as a result of all of those technical trilaterals, we hope the Commission will come back with a revised proposal, and they might do that maybe a few days before Council begins. So maybe we will see some movement there. It was certainly a surprise to us. We think it's unjustified, completely unjustified, but I think that there has been a lot to think about from the Commission's perspective in terms of these uplifts that are affected by discard plans.
In relation to the prawns, 70% cut, will that have a bigger effect than?
Oh yeah,
yes,
because
prawns are the big.
Absolutely. I mean, prawns is the prawns are very, very valuable to the. What were the numbers of it? Anywhere between 13 and 15 million pounds worth of prawns are landed, and haddock would be in the region of about $1 million.
Haddock. No, what's it there?
Yeah. £2,000 a tonne.
Yeah, so haddock's about 600,000 a year.
We're 20% of 13 million, or 17% of 13 million would be.
It would be a lot of income for the fishing industry to lose, and it's not justified. You know, as I say, Chair, the complication this year is because of the uplift to do with the landing obligation. But we are in precisely the same position as we were last year, as we were the year before that, in terms of our argument. And we have prevailed, and we thought actually that the Commission had accepted the principle that the TAC would move in tandem with the science, move up and down in tandem with the science, but this demonstrates that they're in a different place. Now, whether they've done it differently, you know, you then have to argue and spend time arguing for this, and wasting negotiating capital on that, whenever really I think they should know better.
Any other members have any questions?
Yeah, Chair.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm surprised to hear you say that the fishing fleet, the fishing men were all happy about the 2%. Did you say that?
No, I'm saying that they're happy with the principle that the TAC is set at a higher level than the science, but that TAC will vary up and down according to what the science is saying. So if next year the science is 5% better than this year, they would expect it to go up by 5%. Yeah. But it is what it is. You know, whenever it is down, the science is down, and say it dropped by 5%. If you were to ignore that fact, well, then you could do some detrimental damage to the fishery.
Right. Okay. The other thing is that the landing obligation. That's new. I mean, before that, it was the discard that was. I understood from last year that they were trying to overcome the problem of discarding altogether. But that doesn't really. Are they just using a different terminology?
It's the same thing. The landing obligation and the discard ban are in fact the same thing.
We're not any further for it this year than we were last year, because I mean I can remember visiting Brussels with a lady, I forget her name now, but she was you know, very optimistic that the discard would be a thing of the past and all that sort of stuff, but that's not the case.
Well, we have until 2019 for the landing obligation or discard ban to come fully into effect. It has to be phased in to give the industry time to adapt and adopt new technology so that they're not having to land. What we don't want to do is land a whole lot of unwanted fish that then becomes a problem on shore. So at the beginning of last year, the herring and mackerel fisheries had to comply with the landing obligation. This year, it's for us, it's the Nephrops fishery and the haddock fishery have to comply. And the intention, if possible, is to phase in more fisheries up until 2019. So by 2019, all the quota species, if they're caught in the nets, they have to be landed.
Yeah, okay. You said that the scientists had indicated that there was an increase in the volume. Was that right? And you know, the volume of catch. So, because as I understand it, the whole thing over the number of years was to try and resurrect the stock in the seabed, and we're years into cut, and we don't seem to be anywhere near. Did you say that the scientists were happy that there was an increase, but yet you're not going to be allowed to get them, pick them up?
Science measure things and they report the numbers. I can't say I have met a happy or an unhappy scientist, but they simply measure that and report the numbers, and they put the numbers into stock assessments. There is a situation with cod, because cod is subject to a recovery plan. And it has been subject to a recovery plan for some years, but it's also accepted that perhaps that plan is flawed, and that there are difficulties over the being able to estimate or to gauge what will happen to what is a relatively small stock. Now, unfortunately, we have a cod recovery plan that can't be changed right away, because we're in the middle of doing other things to do with landing obligations and so forth. But we think that in the future there will be a plan that will be a multi-species plan for the Irish Sea, which will accept or acknowledge that if you're going to fish for one thing, it will have this impact on another, or if you're going to take so much of that, it'll have that impact. It will look at the whole relationship between all of the different species that are being targeted. Whereas the cod recovery plan at the moment focuses simply on cod and has impacts and detrimental impacts on some of the other fisheries. So I think that. I think we're confident, or reasonably confident, in the science and in the data that is being collected about Irish sea fisheries, and that's been fed into the system. We're maybe not happy about the way the Commission regards some of that scientific advice. The fact that they have like to have analytical assessments, and if they don't have analytical assessments, then they want certain things to happen. The situation that we're in at the moment is no different really from the situation we were in last year.
Well, that is disappointing, because we want to see the fishing industry revived to what it was, 10 years ago, for instance, and that we don't seem to be making much progress. For whatever
Tell them
reason,
to stop catching fish.
No. But you have to catch fish because the people want it. It's supposed to be good for your health, etc., etc. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the days at sea. What I think I've seen somewhere where you had there's no change, no fishing effort. Days at sea proposals were made. I mean, that's always been a gripe of the fishermen, that they could be out fishing doing their work, but they're prevented. Is that still the same this year? Are you going to fight for that?
No. This is what was being overturned by Council some years ago, whenever they said that we're not having and not accepting any more further cuts to days at sea, and effectively the amount of fishing effort was cut at that level in 2012. Because that was contrary to the provisions that were in the cod plan, the European Parliament and the European Commission took the Council to the European Court of Justice and said what you did was not legal. And that position was upheld. But what the European Court of Justice said is that the freeze on effort can remain for another year, and that's to give legislators and other people an opportunity to sort out a reasonable solution. As far as the impact on fishermen is concerned, we have been running a very, very significant programme of adoption of highly selective fishing gear. And the effect of that is that we have been able to give to fishermen on 200 days at sea, on average, the fishing fleet is out there fishing 150 to 160 days at sea. So, there are no constraints on their fishing activities at the moment. If anything, probably the amount of fish and fishing opportunities is the constraint, not the days at sea. So we have taken steps to actually buy back and get concessions that are within the rule book, to the point where our fleet is not affected by fishing effort. It's not an issue for our fleet. Right. I believe, anyway. I mean, I'm not sure who is advising you on that, but I would like to have a debate on them as to whether it does have an effect.
Right. And finally, you did say that the fishermen and their representatives have had a meeting with the Minister.
Yes.
Probably yourselves. And is the Minister well aware of what is required to get the fishing industry surviving and indeed to prosper as she goes out?
Well, she will do what she can, which is within her control. She will make her case, and she will argue her case on the basis of science, as she always does. But as far as the good fortune and prospects of the fishing industry are concerned, much of it is out with the Minister's control, including input costs, fish prices, other things. But as far as fishing opportunities are concerned, she will be there arguing for the maintenance of fishing opportunities for the prawn fleet at the current level, and she'll be looking for an increase in the haddock quota, because that's what the science is telling us.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Robin Swan.
Thank you, Chair. Gentlemen, just a very simple area 6A, according to the stock assessment area. What will we be fishing out of that, or do we fish out of that?
Prawns, sometimes.
Just prawns sometimes.
Aye.
So the Margaret that's in there at the minute, the world's second largest fishing factory. has no effect on our fishing fleet or our fish stocks?
No, I mean, if it's there at all, it's because it's got fishing opportunities, you know.
It's there according to its tracker, that's my...
It'll probably be there fishing for pelagic species and fishing for maybe blue whiting or something like that. But it is a European registered fishing vessel, and it is entitled to be there, and it is entitled to fish provided it has quota for that. And other countries, it is Dutch owned, as far as I know, a Dutch owned Lithuanian registered vessel, which has been there and has fished, and it fished there last year as well, and took blue whiting there last year. It's not a Johnny come lately to there. It has been off the coast.
That's what I'm saying, but the changes we're seeing now about landing regulations and all the rest.
Oh, that's got nothing to do with nothing to do with that at all. And indeed, the species that vessel is targeting, and legitimately targeting because it has quota to take, are not species that are being taken by the majority of our fleet. Only one vessel in our fleet, which has now been sold to Norway, had quota for blue whiting, for example. And we had blue whiting, I think, at the start of the year, but not all of it was fished, and some of it was swapped out. So the Northern Ireland industry has not needed the blue whiting quota that it has had.
That's right. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation again. We wish you well in your negotiations.
Thank you very much.
Hope that you come out on top, and I'm sure you will inform us of the...
Yeah, we'll send Stella our customary email from the early hours as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, agenda item 11 that we were to get a mid-year progress report on Dard business plan targets. That's going to happen now next week, which is the right side of me. I'm sure you are all happy enough that's not going to be taking place tonight, so that is happening next week. On the agenda item 12, written brief Dard, the Zoonoses Fees Amendment Regulations in Northern Ireland 2016. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 185 to 187 and papers from the department at pages 188 to 207. And advise members that Dard is proposing a 6-week public consultation in the Zoonoses Fees Amendment Regulations in Northern Ireland 2016 to begin on the 2nd of December 2015 and close on the 13th of January 2016. Following the annual review of costs relating to the sampling of testing regimes for breeder, layer and boiler chicken flocks and turkey flocks required in current legislation, Dard is updating the fees regulations to amend the fees charged to the poultry industry to ensure full cost recovery for services provided in line with government policy. All but one of the compulsory fees are decreasing. The only fee to increase is that for taking or supervising the taking of official control sample, which will rise from £59 for the first 30 minutes to £62.23 for the first 30 minutes, an increase of 7.717%. Further details of the proposed changes are provided at page 204. Can I seek comments from members? Okay. Yep. Agenda item 13, written briefing for Dard, the Northern Ireland Poultry Health Assurance Scheme Fees Amendment Order to Northern Ireland 2016. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 209 to 210 and papers from the department at pages 211 to 226. Can I advise members that Dard is proposing again a 6-week public consultation on the Northern Ireland Poultry Health Assurance Scheme Fees Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2016 to begin on the 2nd of December 2015 and close on the 20th of January 2016, allowing for an extra week due to Christmas. The Northern Ireland Poultry Health Assurance Scheme was introduced in 1989 and implemented a system of approval for establishments officially recognised as meeting the requirement of Council Directive 2009-158 EC, which controls animal health conditions governing inter-community trade in live poultry and hatching eggs. Scheme members is subject to a satisfactory veterinary inspection to establish whether the premises and its management procedures meet the requirements laid out in the directive. An annual veterinary inspection is also required to confirm that the NAFIS rules are being IAFIS, provided rules are being complied with, and DARD reserves the right to make additional checks and inspections during the course of the membership year. DARD intends to introduce new fees to the regulations for the 2015-16 financial year in order to ensure full recovery of costs for services provided. This is the first fee uplift since 2013, and an increase of 8.75% for registration and first year membership, 20.35% for the annual membership fee, and 2.61% for supplementary audit inspection fees. Can I see comments from members? Okay, members, have any? Okay. Then item 14, written briefing from DARD, the Scrapie Fees Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2016. And refer members to the memo from the clerk at page 228 and papers from the department at pages 229 to 242. Can I advise members that DARD is proposing a 6-week public consultation on the Scrapie Fees Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2016 to begin on the 2nd of December 2015 and close on the 20th of January 2015, again allowing for an extra week due to Christmas. The Scrapie Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2008 provide the Department with a strategy basis for charging fees for the operation of the Scrapie Monitored Flock Scheme SMFS. The current fees payable for the scheme membership were set in 2013 under the Scrapie Fees Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2013. The Department is seeking to update the fees to a level that will achieve full cost recovery in the 2015-16 financial year. The revised fees will be £233.44 for initial flock inspection and £115.04 for subsequent annual membership, increases of 12.44% and 23.17% respectively. Again, can I see comments from members?
Don't object.
Okay,
just to say that, I mean, those percentages is way above inflation, and I'm sure the seed producers, people, will not be at all happy. But there you go.
Well, I'm not so sure the date in 2013, so it's probably 2.5 years. It is above inflation, there's no doubt about that, especially that 23.17%. It's well above inflation for that time. Were the members happy? Or? Okay.
Next one, comment.
Agenda item 15.
I wouldn't be overly happy. I understand the argument that they're making, but I think it's getting to the point where kind of fleece the farming and agriculture industry.
Well, what they're saying is full cost recovery. That's the difficulty we have. Earlier, it seems to be a big change in the full cost recovery in a short period of time. Good enough.
I can ask for a more detailed written. They're going out to consultations with the.
Sure, you've got a time here. We're going to do that. That's fair enough.
And I'll get the
Yes.
written.
Why the 23.17? Why is the uplift so high in that regard? Then item 15, written briefing from DARD SL1, the seed potato regulations Northern Ireland 2015. Can refer members from the memo of the clerk at pages 244 to 245. On papers from the department at pages 246 to 298. And advise members that DARD proposes to make the above named statutory rule on the powers conferred on it by section 1.1 and 2A and 2 of the Seeds Act Northern Ireland 1965 and in exercise of the powers in section 2.2 of the European Communities Act 1972. The main objective of the proposed regulations is to implement EU standards for seed potatoes in order to fulfil the requirements of the relevant directives and Commission decision. These regulations will lay down the minimum standards required to be satisfied for certification of seed potatoes, provide for a common set of common grade names with associated standards and tolerances for basic and pre-basic seed potatoes respectively, and allow Northern Ireland to restrict the marketing of seed potatoes to basic seed potatoes of union grade standard. The rule will be laid under the negative resolution procedure, and it is anticipated that it will come into operation on the 1st of January 2016. Can I see comments from members? Can I put the question then on that one? Can I seek agreement for the regulations move to the next legislative stage on that? Is that all those or just that one?
Just that one.
Just that one, that's what I thought. Okay.
Chair, can I just clarify, I'm not objecting, but the Republic of Ireland, it says in the clerk's memo, are also required to implement this decision. Do we know what stage their legislative process is at.
Okay.
Okay, so it's probably technical, I will thought, yeah. Okay. We move on to agenda item 16, written brief from DAR, the 2014 TB programme annual report, and refer members to the papers from the Department of the page 300 to 358. The 2014 TB programme annual report reveals that there was a 6.97% increase in the total number of reactors to the skin test in 2014 compared with 2013. This represents an increase of 576 animals. The number of the new BTB herd breakdowns was 5.5% lower, representing a decrease of 82 herds. So even though herds were lower, there was more animals. The cost of the programme increased by 3.5% to £26,709,337, according to standardised figures gathered for the annual EU returns. The committee formally received briefing on TB and on departmental progress on the recommendations in the committee inquiry report on a 6-monthly basis. As the last briefing was provided on the 30th of June 2015, the committee may wish to request that an update by DARD officials be scheduled after recess and as soon as the forward vote programme allows after the recess. Can I see comments from members again?
Great.
Great, okay. Move on to agenda item 17, correspondence. Confirm members to the correspondence received at pages 362 to 379. Can I seek agreement to action the correspondence as suggested on the index sheet at pages 360 to 361?
Great.
Okay. Agenda item 18, forward vote.
Just in regard, it's the first one is in regard to defer the target date for the completion of the TB eradication strategy.
They're coming back.
When do we think we're going to get them in? Because I'm just conscious that they're saying March 16.
Yes, the group, the TB Strategic Partnership Group, is the industry body that's looking at this whole thing independently from the department.
Yeah.
And we've had both the department and this group up on separate occasions. Do you want them up as well?
I'm just concerned one will play the other. You know, they'll play one off each other and say we'll have to wait in the group reporting. If you know what I mean. If we have them up here in January, they're going to say, well, we're not due to report to March.
And then this group's not due to report to March. Yeah.
But it might be worthwhile having. I don't know.
Well,
it might be worthwhile having maybe an informal meeting with the chair and deputy chair with the strategic group.
Well, that's something I would do, wouldn't it? Okay. Agenda item 18, forward work programme. I refer members to the draft forward work programme at pages 381 to 384. Can arraign members of the decision taken earlier with regards to the meeting up to the 8th of December. Can I seek comments from members on the forward work programme? Can I seek agreement with the forward work programme? Great. Any other business members want to raise at this stage? No?
Just one. I think we're going to close.
Just before we close, maybe, do you want to do that now?
You don't have to date and time next meeting?
The date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting, the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Development will take place Tuesday, 8th of December 2015 at 1:30 in Room 30 Parliament Buildings. Just before we leave, earlier on in relation to the writing to the Minister in relation to the Fisheries Bill, we said we'd write to the CAL Committee, but still I want it clear. Do you want the committee her to write to the Minister too to make it clear to her? I think she probably needs to do that.
I'm sure that we made a final decision.
Oh, I write to both.
Yeah, I think so. It needs to happen.